A memory surfaces, a woman's voice recalling a wizard's words. The boy is his country's treasure. She explains he is a treasure powerful enough to drive the world mad and bring nations to ruin. To keep him from being found, she vowed to hide him away. The memory triggers a jolt, his eyes snapping open. The boy awakens, submerged in a red liquid inside a large glass tube, completely wrapped in bandages. A man with long, light-colored hair and an eye patch sits nearby, holding a large scythe, observing him. A special castle, built in a place far from the mundane world. The towering structure is a strange and imposing sight. The bandaged boy gasps for air as he emerges from the vat. He collapses onto the floor, splattering the red liquid around him. Coughing, the boy struggles to push himself up from the puddle of red fluid. The liquid drains away down a grate in the floor. The man with the eye patch watches him, a faint smile on his lips. He congratulates the boy, declaring that this is the beginning of his new life. The boy looks up, his eyes wide with confusion, wondering who this man is. The man explains that he found the boy right after he had collapsed. Confused, the boy asks about the red substance, which a hooded figure identifies as roses. The boy has never heard of them. He asks where he is, and is told he's on the lowest level of the castle. The man introduces himself as Zemu, the master of Shakyuten Castle, and declares he is a wizard. The boy is unfamiliar with the term, repeating it in confusion. Zemu brushes it off, saying the past doesn't matter, and asks for the boy's name. The question stumps the boy. He realizes he doesn't know who he is. Zemu diagnoses it as dissociative amnesia, or memory loss, noting that it happens sometimes. The reality of his memory loss hits the boy and he panics. Zemu, flustered, suddenly calls for someone named Shimao. The boy, eager to follow an order, responds with a sharp, "Yes, sir." A massive, striped, snake-like creature appears with a flourish. It announces its arrival, standing behind Zemu and the boy. Zemu orders the creature, Shimao, to take the new recruit to the bathing room. Shimao enthusiastically agrees, grabbing the bewildered boy with its tongue. The creature then swoops away, carrying the boy with it. Shimao drops the boy into a large bath with a splash. The creature cheerfully tells him to wash all the dirt off before disappearing. Sputtering, the boy wonders what the strange creature was. Zemu's words about a new life echo in his mind. Alone in the water, he feels uneasy about the strange place and considers running away. As he looks up, the boy is amazed to see the sky. He marvels at the size of the window, splashing excitedly in the water. Suddenly, a woman's voice screams "no" in his head, causing him to jolt. He realizes someone just spoke directly into his mind. It was a woman's voice, followed by a real scream. A girl with red hair in buns is flung into the room by Shimao's tongue, screaming for the creature to let her go. After being tossed around, the girl lands with a solid thud. Shimao announces that Zemu wants the girl to take care of the new recruit. The boy watches her arrival, still partially submerged in the bath. She mutters that no one in the castle seems to know the meaning of the word gentle. Noticing the boy, she asks if he's hurt, and he explains that Zemu was supposed to have healed him. The boy explains he isn't in any pain, and that the red substance was apparently roses. The girl sniffs the air, noting it's hard to smell the wet roses, and tells him to come over. She and her companions remark on his long hair and strange clothes, confirming he's a boy and offering a change of clothes. When asked his name, he struggles to remember, unable to form the word. A memory flashes, the woman's voice warning him, "You mustn't, Prince." Startled by the sudden memory, he covers his mouth. He tries to dismiss it, but the thought lingers. The girl stares at him, then points accusingly, asking if he's a human. The girl yanks off his bandages, sniffing him and declaring that behind the roses, he has the unique scent of a human. Confused, the boy asks if she isn't human as well. She proudly introduces herself as Rachel, a demi-human anthro, and chides primitives for their weak sense of smell. She exclaims that he's probably the first human the castle has ever had. As the boy asks what this place is, Rachel mutters about how Zemu, who hates humans, could have brought one here, concluding it must finally be time. Rachel wonders aloud if the stupid Zemu has decided to take on an apprentice. The boy, now dressed, looks on with a blank expression. Another young man with a ponytail, Saiyan, asks what she's talking about as they enter Zemu's chamber. Rachel and Saiyan confront Zemu, questioning why he would take in a human child whom he claims to find cunning. Zemu simply states the boy fell into his garden, but they don't believe him. Ignoring their accusations, Zemu assigns Rachel the task of educating the boy so he can live in the castle. Rachel protests that the boy has amnesia and knows nothing, not even how to tie an apron. Zemu hints that, as a great wizard, he might have a way to restore the boy's memory, piquing their interest. Zemu warns the boy that his magic is expensive and not to be used lightly, demonstrating his power. The boy Saiyan is startled by the sudden display of magic. Zemu explains that his role is to use his power for tasks only he can perform. However, he admits that sometimes his magic acts on a whim, which is why he took the boy in and healed him. Zemu tells the boy his injuries were more mental than physical, suggesting his amnesia might be a necessary escape. He advises the boy to consider himself still in recovery. Saiyan offers him a place in the castle if he works, advising him to think hard about his future. The boy silently agrees. Reichai, however, insists Zemu give the boy a name if he's staying, calling him a temporary apprentice. Zemu angrily refutes the idea of an apprentice, declaring the boy already has a name and shoos them away. Saiyan wonders why Zemu gave him such a harsh look. As they walk away, Reichai tells Saiyan she now understands why Zemu took the boy in. She explains that Zemu, despite being selfish and contrary, can't abandon the weak. She admits that if it weren't for that kindness, she'd have a hard time believing he's one of the powerful wizards of the 7 colors. Saiyan ponders the title Wizards of the 7 Colors as Reichai tasks him with carrying buckets. Reichai explains their job is to clean the castle and do odd jobs. Saiyan wonders if this means he owes Zemu his life. He struggles with a wobbly stack of buckets, and Reichai warns him not to overdo it. As they walk down a corridor, Saiyan feels lost and unsure of what to do here. Saiyan reflects on how complicated his situation has become. He remembers the voice calling him a prince, which clashes with the idea of being a wizard's apprentice. Zemu told him to think things over, but Saiyan doesn't even know who he is. Reichai announces they're almost there. He gets the feeling it might be better if he didn't remember his past, but at the same time he has the opposite feeling, a desire to know. Saiyan looks up at a strangely designed door, still carrying his buckets. He remarks that it's a strange castle, and Reichai retorts, asking if he expected a wizard's castle to be normal. She's shocked he doesn't even know who Zemu is after speaking with him. Saiyan struggles for words, finally saying that Zemu is not a typical being. Reichai listens intently to his description. Reichai explains that Zemu is an immortal from the world of Haze, essentially a god and spiritual master. Saiyan is shocked by the revelation that Zemu is a god. Reichai recounts that Zemu simply trained in magic, overdid it, and somehow became a god. Saiyan repeats this in disbelief, while Reichai doubts that alone would make one a wizard of the 7 colors. She explains that mana is split into 7 colors, and the highest-ranking wizard for each is one of the 7 colors, the pinnacle of the magic world. Reichai reveals that Zemu is the wizard of green mana, the newest of the 7 colors, yet rumored to be hundreds of years old. Saiyan, stunned that immortals exist, is told that all of the 7 colors are immortal. He questions if wizards have always been that way. He recalls the wizard he knew, implying they were different. Saiyan asks about the woman in his memories, but Reichai says she was talking about true wizards, not the pseudo-wizards of today. She explains that pseudo-wizards emerged about 1,000 years ago when crystallized mana stones, or jewels, began to be discovered everywhere. Reichai turns around to find Saiyan has vanished, leaving his buckets and apron behind. Saiyan sprints away, determined to escape. A memory of his protector, demanding he return, fuels Saiyan's escape. He believes he must leave before causing trouble. He suspects this place isn't his castle. Meanwhile, Reichai panics, wondering why the newbie ran off. She fumes that this must be what people mean when they call human children cunning, and yells for Shimao. Saiyan decides to head downstairs to find an exit. Saiyan recalls the feeling of being high up, and realizes this castle is the same. He struggles to remember something important, but can't quite grasp it. Unable to get his bearings, he decides to look for a window. He yanks on a door handle, hoping for an escape through a window, but finds it locked. He frantically tries door after door, only to find them all locked. Frustrated, Saiyan runs through the disorienting corridors. He can't find any stairs leading down, only more leading up. He wonders aloud if this is what a wizard's castle is truly like. He is startled by a sudden noise from behind. Shimao appears from a portal in the wall, cheerfully announcing, "Found ya." Saiyan screams and flees from the hissing Shimao. Elsewhere, Zemu learns of the boy's escape from Reichai. Reichai reports that he vanished without a trace, showing surprising stealth. Zemu laughs amused, while Reichai demands he stop and reveals she sent Shimao after him. Saiyan continues his panicked flight down a long staircase. The chase becomes a chaotic scene, with multiple images of Saiyan running along Shimao's weaving body. Saiyan wonders if the creature is a demon beast. He spots a window and makes a break for it. But the voice from his memory urgently warns him not to open the window. She cautions that something evil will come in if he does. He slams his hand against the wall, stopping just short of the window. Saiyan bursts through a door onto an outdoor balcony. He is startled by the sudden change in scenery. He looks over the edge into a vast swirling abyss, unable to see the bottom. He marvels at the strange plants growing around the castle. Suddenly, Shimao smashes through the glass door behind him. Shimao lands on the balcony, complaining about getting glass in its mouth. Saiyan kicks off the wall to dodge the creature. He slides down a giant vine, pursued by thorny projectiles fired by the castle's plants. He scrambles along a ledge, thinking the place is seriously dangerous. Reicha reports to Zemu that the boy vanished without a sound, even leaving his apron neatly folded. She compares him to a shinobi, and Zemu calmly tells her that her knowledge is biased. Zemu muses that it's as he feared, perhaps that line of work is impossible for the boy. Reicha insists that his precious pupil has run away, but Zemu is unconcerned. Zemu smirks, confident that no mere boy could ever escape his castle. As Zemu confidently bets the boy will return in tears, massive explosions and crashes rock the castle. Seeing the destruction, Zemu realizes now is not the time for making bets. He roars in fury that this is his castle. Shimao smashes through a wall right behind Saiyan. Saiyan continues his desperate flight, wondering why the creature can always find him. Saiyan suddenly realizes Shimao must be tracking him by the scent of roses. He wonders what to do, as even being submerged in water didn't wash it off. As he rounds a corner, he bumps into the young man with the ponytail, sending his load of laundry flying. Saiyan quickly apologizes before continuing his escape. The young man is left bewildered on the floor. The woman with the bob cut notices the strong scent of roses as the commotion approaches. Shimao barrels through the laundry area, scattering clothes everywhere. She yells at Shimao to knock it off. In the kitchen, a chef wonders what the noise is. In the garden, a goat-like resident thinks Shimao must want mushrooms. The commotion even reaches the library, toppling a stack of books. The widespread chaos even disturbs a resident napping peacefully in a hammock. Saiyan continues to flee from Shimao, determined not to be caught. A memory of his protector's voice urges him to wait. An attendant with a spectral tiger appears, pleading with the prince not to proceed, as his head will roll if anything happens to him. In his memory, the attendant apologizes for being harsh, but begs him not to stray. He repeats that Saiyan must not be discovered by anyone. He acknowledges how lonely the boy must feel. He promises to always serve and protect him until the day he dies. The memory solidifies Saiyan's resolve. He knows he has to go back, unwilling to make that person sad. He turns and runs, declaring he's going home to his castle. He runs through a doorway and out into an open area. He finds himself in a garden. Remembering Zemu's words, he realizes this must be the garden he fell into and a possible exit. Zemu appears, floating in the air, shouting at the boy to wait and stop wreaking havoc in his castle. Saiyan is amazed that the wizard can fly. Zemu angrily asks if he's making fun of a wizard. They begin to argue, with Saiyan insisting Zemu said he could work, and Zemu denying it. Reicha and Shimao watch the bickering from afar. Watching the chaos, Reicha tells Zemu to just capture him and make him his apprentice already. They continue to argue, Saiyan insisting he's going home. Exasperated, Zemu shouts that since he took the boy in, he is now his property and must quit arguing and work. Saiyan is shocked by the sudden change in tone. He accuses Zemu of being a poor excuse for a god and showing him no respect. Finally, Saiyan relents. Saiyan kneels formally before a stunned Zemu. He thanks Zemu for saving his life, but firmly states he will never become his apprentice. Zemu is confused, insisting he never said anything about an apprenticeship. Saiyan continues, promising to prepare fitting gifts as proof of his gratitude once he returns to his country. Saiyan yells, asking Zemu to tell him what gifts he wants so they can call it even. Zemu, shocked and offended, accuses the boy of trying to buy him off and making fun of him. Losing his patience completely, he roars that enough is enough. Zemu unleashes his magic, sending cloth-like bindings to capture Saiyan. Saiyan dodges and weaves between the incoming attacks. Reicha watches, impressed by the human child's moves. The bindings close in, coming from all directions at once. He realizes it's no use trying to evade them. Just as the bindings are about to connect, a swirling force field erupts around Saiyan, deflecting them. Reichai is stunned, exclaiming in disbelief at the sight of a force field. Zemu looks on with a smirk, his eye twitching in surprise. Saiyan apologizes for his rudeness, but he insists that he has to get home, unleashing a wave of dark energy. The power swirls in his eyes, creating a vortex of energy. With a final cry, Saiyan declares he must go back to her as the vortex in his eyes expands. Zemu calmly prepares a counterspell. Zemu casts a complex spell, forming a sigil in his hand. The magic connects with Saiyan's back, imprinting a glowing seal. Suddenly, a mass of padded hands erupts from the seal on Saiyan's back. The hands engulf him, neutralizing his power and knocking him unconscious. Zemu declares that since his magic is expensive, Saiyan will now have to work to pay him back. Reichai sighs, thinking Zemu is so immature. Reichai realizes the binding spell came from inside Saiyan's own force field, meaning Zemu had already marked him. The thought gives her chills. She recalls that stamping someone's neck is how you make them an official member of the household. Later, Reichai announces her presence as she enters Saiyan's room. She finds a sullen Saiyan looking out the window, his demeanor completely changed. Reichai brings Saiyan a meal, noting he seems like a different person. She explains that while Zemu forbids food for those who don't work, medical patients are an exception. Saiyan glumly observes that there's no way out of the room. Reichai informs him that a tight force field is now in place and Zemu will have to repair all the damage himself. Saiyan argues it wasn't his fault, but Reichai bluntly points out that it was. When Saiyan asks if Zemu can't just use magic, Reichai clarifies that he avoids using large amounts of mana unless absolutely necessary. Reichai explains Zemu will have to repair the castle little by little, prompting Saiyan to ask if this is the afterlife. He speculates that he might be dead and can never return to life. Reichai bluntly tells him he's alive and that death exists here too. Once you die, that's it. When she asks if he remembered something, he quietly says no. As he lies in bed, a voice from his memory calls out to him, "Prince." Lying in bed, Saiyan stares at the ceiling. He wonders why the blindfolded woman is the only person he can remember. He questions if he has to stay here forever. Shimao appears, answering that it might not be forever. In a memory, his attendant tells him that if he can keep his promise, it's possible he'll get out of there. She asks if he can keep the promise. The young Saiyan agrees enthusiastically. She tells him she will train him to develop a technique to leave the imperial villa by adulthood, a secret just between them. The memory continues. His attendant tells him he is both his country's treasure and a seed of calamity. She warns him that this is his fate and he cannot escape it. She tells him to be prepared to devote himself to the tireless effort required to face his future. Zemu observes the boy's vacant expression. Saiyan stares blankly, lost in thought. Zemu enters his room and asks why he isn't eating, praising his chef's talent. Saiyan explains that he can't eat something when he doesn't know what's inside it. Saiyan sits silently on his bed, sighing. Zemu returns to the room. He tosses a bundle onto the bed, explaining it's the clothes Saiyan was wearing when he found him. Saiyan examines the luxurious, intricate ceremonial garb. Zemu points out the dragon pattern, a symbol of authority, and the symbol on the back belonging to the flying country. He deduces that Saiyan is likely a survivor of that country's royal family. Saiyan repeats the word survivor in a daze. Zemu delivers the devastating news. Saiyan's country has vanished without a trace, thanks to the world-changing event known as the Kaihen. The shock registers in Saiyan's eye. The revelation triggers another memory fragment for Saiyan. He remembers the voice calling him Prince. Zemu, noticing his distress, asks if he's okay and offers to get him a new meal, suggesting Reichai can be his taste tester. Zemu thinks to himself that the boy still can't accept it. Saiyan, lost in the memory, suddenly grabs Zemu's sleeve. Tears stream down Saiyan's face as he looks up at Zemu. The memory floods back, his eye reflecting the traumatic event. He recalls his protector yelling for him to come back. He sees her reaching for him, desperately calling his name. The full, horrific memory returns, his wizard's head exploding before his very eyes as she reaches for him. Overwhelmed by the traumatic memory, Saiyan collapses against Zemu, sobbing that his wizard died. Through his tears, Saiyan blames himself for her death. Zemu looks on, his expression unreadable. Elsewhere, the other castle residents discuss the afternoon's commotion, remarking on the new human child and speculating on Zemu's reasons for taking him in. Reichai observes that Saiyan cast a spell without a jewel, concluding he possesses mana. The others realize this is rare, and that Zemu will likely take him on as an apprentice, a decision not to be made rashly. Reichai knows Zemu has wanted an apprentice for a while. The chapter ends with a warning that the wizard killer will be on the move again. A voice calls out to Raoe, echoing in a dream. She turns, addressing him as my prince, and notes that he is awake. She tells him that although he has special permission to leave for a ceremony, the time has not yet come. The memory becomes a nightmare as a decaying Raoe clutches at him, pleading for him not to leave her side. Saiyan wakes up, troubled by the nightmare. He sits up in bed, calling out Raoe's name. Though his memories are fragmented, he understands he has lost everything. Reichai puts the pieces together, realizing Saiyan is a prince who lost his country in the cataclysmic Kaihen. She mutters that there is a lot to unpack. She recalls Zemu giving her a strong warning not to ask about the Kaihen, as it would hinder Saiyan's recovery. Yukon, holding a pair of scissors, asks Saiyan if he is sure about his decision. Saiyan pleads with her to cut his hair, explaining that it will get in the way of his work. Yukon announces she's finished, having cut off all his hair as requested. Saiyan is delighted by how light his head feels. Reichai is pleased he has decided to work, but reminds him not to overdo it, as he is still recovering. Now dressed in his work clothes, Saiyan remarks that he feels like he's wanted a haircut for a long time but custom forbade it. Reichai muses that it might have been a taboo. Yukon explains that sharp objects were forbidden near royalty, so they used bladeless tools for trims. Saiyan thanks them, saying he feels much better now that he's no longer being treated like fragile glass. Yukon and Reichai are impressed by his status. He reflects that the small world he was supposed to escape has now vanished completely. Holding a comb that reminds him of his past, he thinks to himself that his wizard is gone. Zemu, the wizard of Forest Green, observes Saiyan and remarks that he looks refreshed. Saiyan apologizes for the trouble he caused and formally states his intention to work under Zemu's guidance. Saiyan admits that his memories of the Kaihen are so shocking that he is scared to remember it all. He tells Zemu that, as the wizard himself suggested, he may need more time. Therefore, Saiyan declares that he cannot consider becoming his apprentice right now. Zemu explodes, shouting that he already told him he never offered an apprenticeship. Saiyan continues, bowing deeply and promising to repay Zemu for his trouble as soon as possible. Zemu is left speechless, simply agreeing. As Saiyan walks away, Yukon praises his good manners, while Reichai asks Zemu if he can find out the boy's name, given his royal status. Zemu explains that the flying country was highly secretive, so there is very little information available. Reichai asks Saiyan why he's so surprised, and he explains that the only person he can remember is his attending wizard. Yukon is shocked he had a wizard attending him, and Saiyan adds that he thinks he left his home for the first time on that day. He tries to recall others at the castle, but his impressions are too faint. Zemu calls out to the boy, telling him to come here. Zemu tugs him closer. Zemu pulls Saiyan close, sniffing his hair and commenting on the lovely fragrance of roses. He announces that he is giving the boy his first task as a newbie, which confuses the others. The task is to find what Shakyutin Castle is missing. Zemu tells him to observe carefully and think for himself. He will ask for the answer once Saiyan has finished his work, and the boy agrees. Reichai confidently states that she knows what the castle is missing, an apprentice. She points out that Saiyan has no place to go and urges him to become Zemu's apprentice. They pass a destroyed corridor, and Reichai reminds Saiyan that the area is off-limits because he's the one who broke it. She asks if he learned his powerful technique from his attending wizard. Reichai speculates his wizard must have been a gem user, but Saiyan doesn't know what that is. Realizing Saiyan's lack of knowledge, Reichai sighs and decides she needs to back up and explain. She begins by explaining that 1,000 years ago, magic was limited to those born with mana, but now gems allow anyone to dabble in it. Reichai elaborates that gems are crystallized mana, and their extraction led to a boom in spellcasting, making them a super valuable resource used in all kinds of everyday items. She explains that those who cast spells using gems are known as gem wizards, and their power corresponds to the quality of the gems they possess. In contrast, the high-ranking wizards of the 7 colors can draw mana directly from their territories and even create their own gems. Saiyan wonders why everyone doesn't learn these techniques, and Reichai tells him that's why he should become an apprentice, as the 7 colors are immortal and exist on another level. She reasons that since Seian is a human child who possesses a high tolerance for mana, he is the best-suited candidate for an apprenticeship. Understanding dawns on Seian, and he realizes that their job for the day must be something special. Seian and Rachel arrive at a courtyard overcome with lush, wild growth, and he marvels at how quickly it all came back. Rachel explains that their job is to clear out all the moss, mold, and mushrooms, which they couldn't do yesterday because of the fallout from his escape attempt. As they work, a strange creature suddenly emerges from the overgrowth, startling Seian. Rachel explains that this is the master of the room, and perhaps a colleague. She calls the creature Iyo and scolds it for dozing off again. To Seian's surprise, Iyo shoots out a long tongue and eats a large clump of moss. Rachel introduces Seian to Iyo, calling the strange creature a major asset for their task. Back in his chamber, Zemu sits quietly on his throne. He pauses, lost in thought. A disembodied voice asks him if he shouldn't just make the boy remember everything. The voice insists there's no use buying time, as the boy's powers have awoken and there's no sealing them away again. Zemu simply replies that he's still just a child. The voice declares that it's karma. A memory flashes through Zemu's mind of someone telling him to go to sleep and that the outside air is toxic. Zemu surveys a vast, desolate landscape where a massive, contained sphere of energy pulses, a scar left by the Kaihen. The energy inside the sphere forms intricate, map-like patterns. Zemu observes that the sphere isn't expanding, guessing he's keeping it in check. A voice calls out to him, "Hey there, Greenie." Another wizard flies rapidly toward the sphere. The newcomer lands deftly on a pair of crossed staffs. The newcomer chides Zemu for taking so long and asks if he's worried about his domain being caught in the mess. Zemu calmly greets his little brother. Yusen snaps back that Zemu is dumb, insisting he is conducting an important inspection, unlike Zemu's usual errands. He furiously introduces himself as Yusen, the wizard of Soil Black, shouting that he is older than Zemu. Zemu calmly explains that age is irrelevant for beings who have lived for centuries, once again calling Yusen dumb. Yusen resorts to childish taunt, which Zemu points out is something not even modern kids say. Yusen angrily accuses Zemu of being a contrary shut-in who's never had an apprentice, so he couldn't possibly know anything about children. Zemu changes the subject, asking Yusen if he knows why it was called the Flying Country. Yusen admits he doesn't know, only that it was a magically founded nation on the frontier where anything was possible. Yusen adds that the country's destruction was said to have been incredibly swift as he prepares a spell. He launches his staffs at the contained energy, causing a large explosion. A figure emerges from the resulting smoke as Zemu wonders aloud if there's a reason for the country's rapid demise. A hooded figure materializes from the smoke. The figure's face is revealed to be a copy of Yusen's. Yusen explains it's a lookout he was ordered to create, and Zemu comments on how creepy it is that he gave it his own face. The lookout turns its attention back to the matter of the Kaihen. The lookout explains that since a Kaihen always occurs near one of the 7 colors, simply being on guard is not enough to prevent it. Yusen asks for Zemu's opinion on the matter. Zemu flatly refuses to share his thoughts. Frustrated, Yusen tells his lookout to leave, and it zips away. Meanwhile, back at Shakyuten Castle, a chef prepares to strike a large gong. While cleaning, Iyo asks what they should do with all the collected debris, and Reichai says they can call Shimao to take it. A loud gong rings out, startling Seian and causing Iyo to spit moss all over him. The sound echoes from the mess hall. Seian wonders aloud if that was a gong, as Reichai reacts with a jolt. Reichai panics, shouting that it's lunchtime and they need to hurry to the mess hall. She runs ahead, pleased that Seian is slowed down by how dirty he is. The castle staff are already eating as the chef, Gaten, reminds the moss scrapers to clean up before joining. Reichai grabs Seian, shouting that he's a mess but they need to get their seats before Iyo does. She aggressively tries to wipe him clean as Yukon watches, exasperated. Yukon approaches, commenting that she can't even look at how dirty Seian is, much to Reichai's annoyance. She smiles, telling Seian that she grants special benefits to those who show promise. As a special treat, Yukon uses her speedy tail washing technique, enveloping both Seian and a protesting Reichai in a flurry of fluff. The chef notes that it's rare for Yukon to take a liking to anyone. Yukon tosses their clean clothes back to a stunned Seian and an irritated Reichai. At the table, Reichai instructs Seian to grab the food he wants quickly. She declares that the dining table is a battlefield where one must eat or be eaten. Gaten, the chef, asks the human child what kind of food he likes. Saiyan says he doesn't have any preferences, and Reichai explains that his memory is still spotty. The chef serves Saiyan some expensive dumplings, telling him he's lucky. Reichai tells him to eat them before they get cold, but Saiyan is amazed at how hot and steamy they are. He asks if they really eat food this hot, much to Reichai's surprise. The other residents are shocked, calling him a sheltered kid and explaining that food is best when it's hot. Intrigued, Saiyan examines a dumpling. He takes a hesitant bite. The heat immediately overwhelms Saiyan, causing him to let out a muffled yell. The others panic, asking if he's okay and telling him to spit it out. He struggles, holding the hot food in his mouth. To their amazement, he manages to swallow it. With his mouth still burning, he asks if this is a daily occurrence, but the others tell him it is not. A kind resident offers him a glass of water. He gulps down the water gratefully. He slams the glass down, shouting about how good the water tastes. Reichai asks what he's talking about, finding his expression scary, and Saiyan has a flash of realization. The goat-horned man watches, amused, thinking Saiyan is an interesting kid. He asks for Saiyan's name, but Yukon reminds him that the boy has memory loss. Saiyan tells them that in his former home he was called Prince and Treasure of the country, which sends Gaten into a fit of laughter. As the others react boisterously, Iyo steals some of his food. Saiyan observes how rowdy everyone is, noting that the prince he once was is not used to such a scene. As his memories return, he sees his past more clearly, recalling Raoe announcing that his meal was ready. He remembers the elaborate, solitary meals served to him. He recalls the lonely meals in a hall decorated with monstrous murals, with only Raoe for company. He reflects that this new place is nothing like the world he came from. A memory of Zemu questioning if he, a non-commoner, could survive here surfaces in his mind. Saiyan tells Zemu that while everything is unfamiliar, it's also interesting and fun and a good distraction. Zemu asks for the answer to his question. Saiyan admits that because everything is so different, he doesn't know what the castle is missing. Zemu hints that it might be something the residents take for granted, but that an outsider would notice. Saiyan agrees that might be true, but explains that his former home was not a typical place. He tells Zemu he grew up in a detached imperial villa. Though others came and went, only he and his attendant Raoe lived there. The villa was barricaded by force fields set up by Raoe. It was a fortress too vast for him alone, where he got anything he wanted but never what he truly craved. He explains that his whole life, he was raised to believe he was special. He was considered the treasure of the country and never allowed out, warned that his discovery would bring ruin to nations. He then asks Zemu a question: is mana toxic to ordinary people? He elaborates, stating that he knows mana is an all-powerful force, but also a strong toxin to some. Saiyan points out the rose scent Zemu placed on him, guessing it's a barrier, not just a tracking spell. He recalls that similar spells were placed on him in his old home because they were necessary. Recalling Raoe's words about his powerful force, he asks Zemu if it's truly safe for him to be in the castle with other people. Saiyan's eyes widen as he listens. Zemu explains that mana is a force that bends the laws of the world, making it toxic to everything living under natural law. Zemu concludes that those who are proficient in handling mana are called wizards. Saiyan hangs his head, realizing that this is why Zemu took him in. He admits he had an inkling, recalling that his mother and several nurses died after his birth, and his attendants were eventually reduced to only Raoe. He explains that even Raoe, his country's strongest wizard, suffered from inflammation all over her body due to his mana. Saiyan confesses that deep down, he always knew she would die for him one day. He explains his frustrations with royal customs and his desperate desire to see the outside world. But more than any of that, he admits that he hated seeing her sad, pleading with him to promise he would use his treasure correctly. Saiyan explains that he could bear his isolated life because Raoe was his entire world. Now that he has nothing, he believes he is in a dangerous state of mind. He questions his future path, peace or vengeance, and asks if Zemu, as an immortal wizard, will take responsibility for his choice. Zemu sighs, calling the boy a handful, and revealing he gave him the task precisely to keep him from dwelling on these things. Zemu admits he underestimated Saiyan's strength of spirit, comparing him to a dangerous raw gem. He confirms Saiyan was born with an exceedingly high amount of mana, but says the truly special part is the ability that comes with it. He warns that while the power could destroy the world, there are those who would steal it even at that cost. Zemu emphasizes just how special and dangerous Saiyan's ability is. Leaning in close, Zemu reveals the boy's true power. His eyes hold the ability to bring back the dead. Zemu gives him a final, absolute command. He must never, under any circumstances, use that power. Lying in his new bed, Saiyan reflects on his past. He can't truly fathom that his entire country has vanished, as his understanding of it was only conceptual. The sky and his country existed merely as things outside his window. His world was as tight as a cocoon within the imperial villa. He remembers that when he lost Raoe, the creator of his world, everything collapsed, along with the plan that would have granted him freedom. Zemu's words echo in his mind, that his eyes hold the power to bring back the dead. Or at least, that's how it was supposed to go. He recalls Zemu's warning to not use his power, but he can't stop thinking about what Zemu said, feeling as though the wizard has cast another, nasty spell on him. The knowledge of his high mana level and a special ability is more than enough reason to be chained up, but now there's no longer any need for him to suffer in silence. Morning arrives at Shakyutin Castle. Saiyan is greeted warmly by Yukon, who wishes the prince a good morning. The other residents join in, calling out greetings to the prince as he joins them for the day. Saiyan is perplexed when a strange automaton comes to fetch him. Yukon explains that it's a gem doll. He points to the eye-like gem that powers it. Yukon notes that while the gem's mana is low, it lasts a long time for rudimentary tasks. She demonstrates how to use it, even for those without spell knowledge, by pressing a button on its back. Yukon gives the doll a command: wake up Raicha and bring her to the mess hall. As the gem doll trundles off, Saiyan marvels that it works on so little mana. Yukon notices he looks hungry and invites him to the mess hall for breakfast. Soon after, the doll returns with a sleepy Raicha draped over it. Yukon scolds her for riding the doll. After breakfast, Raicha leads Saiyan to their cleaning duties, explaining that she'll show him around the castle during their weekly patrol. Raicha reminds Saiyan not to barge into restricted areas, Riley noting the damage he caused on his first day. Saiyan agrees, used to being barred from places. He tries to speak formally with Raicha, but she tells him to relax, as Zemu is lax about such things. He asks what their cleaning entails, and Raicha is shocked she has to explain something as basic as moss removal. Later, as work ends for the day, a gong sounds over Shakyutin Castle. The mess hall erupts into a lively, chaotic dinner. During the frenzied meal, Gaten offers to save a portion for Saiyan, who is struggling to get any food. But Saiyan spots an opening and declares he's got it. With a surprising burst of speed and multiple arms, he deftly snags food from the table. The others are stunned, exclaiming that they didn't even see him move. Saiyan proudly displays his haul, pleased that he got what he wanted. He curiously tries some green food, wondering what it is. The spice is overwhelming, and he immediately breathes fire. The others are shocked he's never had spicy food before, as Gaten laughs at his bravery. Just as they rush to give him water, Zemu appears in a window above them. Zemu calls down, asking if Saiyan is getting enough to eat and teasing him about his shocked expression. He then asks how Saiyan likes the cooking of his genius chef, Gaten, remarking that a meal hits different after a hard day's work. Saiyan, recovered, enthusiastically praises the food as delicious and satisfying. The unexpected praise causes a flustered Gaten to storm off. Raicha explains that Gaten is just jealous, as he's never had Zemu praise his cooking. She clarifies that immortals like Zemu don't eat, they live on air. However, Zemu can't lose his attachment to food, so he had the window built to watch them eat. Yukon and Raichai add that he was an epicure and a traveler when he was still human. This revelation surprises Saiyan, who realizes Zemu wasn't always an immortal wizard. Zemu reappears at the window, summoning Saiyan to his room when he's finished eating. Raichai sighs, remarking on yet another summons. After the meal, Raichai asks what's on his mind, but Saiyan says it's nothing. He goes to Zemu's room, where the wizard asks why he looks so dissatisfied. Saiyan denies it as Zemu levitates down to meet him. Saiyan admits he's afraid Zemu will say something strange to him again, but Zemu feels his evaluation is unfairly low. He then asks why Zemu told him about his power, explaining that the revelation kept him up all night. Zemu replies it was because Saiyan claimed to have nothing left. He then beckons Saiyan forward, promising to give him something necessary for his new life. Zemu presents Saiyan with an enchanted key, and Saiyan correctly guesses it's like the ones the others wear. Saiyan examines the key, noticing the gem embedded in it. Zemu explains that Shakyutin Castle is vast, with countless doors, and the number of doors the key can open depends on the user's rank. Hopeful, Saiyan asks if this means he might even be able to leave the castle. Zemu confirms it's possible if Seian is up to the task. Seian asks what Zemu wants from him. Zemu tells him that being able to open more doors than others is a fortunate thing. He urges Seian not to say that he has nothing. Elsewhere in a grand library, Reichai and Kabu are studying. Reichai asks Kabu for his opinion. She wants to know what he thinks of the new guy, Seian. She argues that while he's ignorant, he meets all the conditions to become Zemu's apprentice, but Kabu replies that it isn't for them to decide. Reichai reminds him that he's the one who brought it up. Reichai brings up the wizard killer who appears with the Kaihen. While none of the 7 colors have been killed this time, the wiping out of an entire magic kingdom is a grave event. Kabu warns her not to speak so carelessly, though Reichai speculates their goal might be to erase all magic users. Kabu explains that the situation is dire, as the wizards of the 7 colors are guardians of the world's magical equilibrium, and leaving their positions vacant could lead to disaster. Kabu reveals the real problem. In the last 10 years, 3 great wizards, one from red, one from blue, and one from purple, have been killed. Reichai laments that their master is a recluse with no apprentice, and while other powers have kept things stable, the situation is precarious. She exclaims that with a Kaihen occurring so close by after 3 years of quiet, things are looking dicey, even with an apprentice. Kabu grimly states that without Zemu, the castle is done for. Reichai panics, questioning what kind of person could kill an immortal. Kabu acknowledges it's a good question, but since the 7 colors have agreed on it, there must be some truth to the threat. He reminds a protesting Reichai to focus on her studies. He then reflects on Seian, noting that it's a huge blow to lose everything, but the boy is showing remarkable resilience. Reichai agrees, asking him not to give Seian too hard a time. Back in his room, Seian considers Reichai's eagerness for him to become an apprentice. To begin with, he realizes there is simply too much he doesn't know. He looks at the key Zemu gave him, a key that opens doors. It represents a chance to grant the wishes of others, but also the risk that he might invite misfortune, as everyone says. He grips the key, resolving that before making any decisions, he needs to learn first. He recalls his former master, Raoe, speaking of a power to bring back the dead, a power she assumed he had. Seian decides that he needs to learn everything about this power, what it requires, the correct way to wield it, and the price of its use. Believing the castle holds the answers he needs, Seian sets off with a purpose. He breezes past Yukon and a drowsy Reichai, who are having breakfast. Yukon notices the key, and Seian explains he'd already tried it on a door. He had thought the keyhole was too big for it to ever fit. To his astonishment, the key magically transforms right in his hand. The door creaks open, and Seian stares in shock at what lies beyond. A hidden stairway appears before him. Yukon explains about the castle's many shortcuts, but cautions him against exploring alone. Suddenly, Gaten calls out from the kitchen, complaining that the fire has gone out and the water won't boil. Yukon observes that the windows are fogged over and the sky is overcast, which Gaten confirms. She orders a sleepy Reichai to go wake up their master, Zemu. Seian is confused, so Yukon explains that the castle itself is asleep because Zemu, its creator, is also asleep. Kabu suggests the strain from dealing with the Kaihen is catching up to him, but Yukon is concerned about letting him sleep too long. After Gaten asks if Zemu would be fine with just a salad for lunch, Yukon firmly decides they are waking him up. She urges Reichai to hurry, but Reichai tries to pass the duty off to someone named Shimao. Seian offers to go in her place, surprising Yukon. Yukon tells him Zemu's chambers are past the green doors at the end of his junk room, which Seian clarifies is his office. Seian asks if the door will open, and Yukon assures him Zemu doesn't lock it, advising him to use his loudest voice. As he heads off, Yukon's voice echoes in his head, telling him to just yell and drag Zemu out of bed, making him question the treatment of a god. The thought brings a memory of Raoe, who is always awake to greet him in the morning. He cautiously pushes the door open and peeks inside. He sees a large, curtained bed in the center of the room. Seian steps into the room, observing that for some reason, its light and billowy nature makes it feel like a nest. He sees a foot peeking out from a massive pile of blankets and hair. Spotting the sleeping figure, Seian resolves to navigate the nest-like bed to get to Zemu's ear. He carefully crawls across the sea of blankets. Taking a deep breath, he leans in close and lets out a tremendous shout. The castle itself seems to cry out in alarm at the sudden disturbance. An enraged Zemu, now revealed to be a woman, screams back at Seian to shut up. Taken aback, Seian says he thought Zemu was dead and wanted to be thorough. The woman sits up, remarking that his method is no way to treat the dead. Seian, completely bewildered, exclaims that he doesn't remember Zemu being a woman, to which she explains this is simply one of her avatars. Confused by the term avatars, Saiyan listens as Zemu explains that immortals don't have gender and that she has 12 different forms. She then shares a piece of trivia: sleeping feels best in a woman's body. Saiyan innocently asks if it feels good being one, musing that their skin is soft and they smell good, which earns him a sigh from Zemu. He then asks if immortals still sleep even though they don't eat, and Zemu compares it to the meals mortals eat. Getting to the point, Saiyan asks if she's having difficulty with the aftermath of the Kaihen. Zemu calls him full of questions and tells him not to concern himself with it, as it's her job. Saiyan admits he doesn't understand what a Kaihen is, and surprisingly, Zemu's avatar says she doesn't either. Sighing, she says she must leave her chambers before everyone gets mad at her. Down below, Yukon notices the clouds have parted, a sign that Zemu is awake. She happily confirms with Gaten that the fire is working again and places an order for breakfast. Later, Reichai tells Saiyan that a certain door has never been opened, but he contemplates trying his key, wondering if the method matters. At a bustling table, Saiyan wonders how he can repay Zemu, since negotiation doesn't seem to be an option. A goat-headed resident named Megai bursts in, shouting that he's late and needs a packed lunch. Gaten calmly provides a meatless meal, and Megai requests a second portion for his master. Saiyan asks about the master, and Reichai asks if he hasn't met him yet. Yukon explains that they have a gardener who rarely comes to the mess hall, and that Megai is his apprentice. Saiyan quietly considers the idea of an apprentice. While Reichai is cleaning lanterns, Saiyan approaches her. He asks if the only way to learn magic is by becoming an apprentice. Reichai excitedly asks if he's interested, but Saiyan clarifies he just wants to find a way to gain insight without a teacher. Reichai tells him that an apprenticeship is the most foolproof method, and Saiyan replies that he expected as much. She explains that apprenticing to a wizard of the 7 colors is a special contract that leads to inheriting their spells, domain, and even becoming immortal. Saiyan nonchalantly says it sounds like a lot of work, exasperating Reichai. Reichai warns him that self-taught magic is risky, but Saiyan quietly admits he already has an idea of the dangers. Holding his mop, Saiyan says resolutely, "But there's only one wizard for me." Reichai realizes what he's talking about. She wonders why he feels the need to remain so loyal to a dead wizard. Saiyan thinks to himself that it's out of the question. He recalls Zemu and thinks that if he were to commit to being his pupil, he would be unable to betray him. He concludes that he would rather die than give up on Raoe and live on, having forgotten her. Elsewhere, a door creaks open in a dark, mysterious room. Zemu, now back in his male form, returns from what was a completely fruitless endeavor. He reasons that with no information found, it's safe to assume the boy's existence remains a secret. A disembodied voice complains about the burden of keeping a secret. Zemu tells the voice from his scythe to stop acting like it isn't also involved. The scythe creature claims this is Zemu's problem alone, stating that he shouldn't have taken the boy in if he didn't like the situation. Zemu walks down a hall, thinking that he couldn't just leave him. He adds that Saiyan was the one who plunged into his domain, cursing as roses wither before him. He stands in his garden, realizing a Kaihen has taken place in his domain, and resolves to seal off the area before it can spread. He sighs, annoyed that he has to destroy a garden he really liked. He decides it's best to destroy it completely, so there's nothing left to miss. Just as he is about to act, a small, glowing creature catches his eye. He stands in the garden, observing the strange phenomenon in the sky. He wonders what's happening, noticing that the magical phantasmagoria are agitated. A multitude of the strange, glowing creatures fill the air. Zemu's expression becomes one of shock and concern. The creatures swarm around a large, glowing sigil that manifests before him. He hovers on his scythe, looking down at the strange light emanating from the garden floor. The voice from his scythe asks who the lucky one will be, him or the boy. Zemu curtly tells the one eye to be quiet. Raoe gazes down, remarking on the beauty of Saiyan's right eye. Saiyan looks up at his master, comparing his own eyes to the sky-colored ones of the prince. The young boy feels his own dark eyes are not nearly as valuable, but Raoe reassures him that they sparkle in their own unique way. From Raoe's point of view, looking into them is like seeing something more. Raoe's voice from the memory describes them as shooting stars streaming into a dark forest at night as the scene transitions to the present under a meteor-filled sky above Shakyutin Castle. At Shakyutin Castle, Reichai is furious to find a hallway completely overgrown. Saiyan remarks on how green everything is, while Reichai laments what happens when she neglects a hallway for even a short time. Deciding that times like this call for special measures, Reichai cups her hands and shouts for Shimo. She tells a confused Saiyan that if they beat the growth back now, they'll be done in no time. A one-eyed creature named Shimao pops into existence, startling Saiyan. After Reichai sends Shimao on an errand, Saiyan quietly wonders what exactly the creature is. Reichai decides that while Iyo handles the overgrowth, they should get some buckets and tools. As they walk, Saiyan is amazed to see the key in Reichai's hand magically change its shape. Reichai explains that the key has handy functions and that most red doors like the one they are approaching are passages or stairs. Reichai points to the gem on the key, beginning her explanation. She blows on the gem, demonstrating one of its functions. Saiyan exclaims as the key lights up, and Reichai explains it's a simple light that can be turned off by blowing again. She adds that the key also functions as a whistle, but warns him it's very loud and should only be used in emergencies. With the demonstration complete, Reichai leads the way, explaining that the red door ahead will take them near the supply closet. Saiyan asks about a large, ornate door, but Reichai tells him it's a no-go, as only the gardener can open it. Just then, a creaking sound comes from the door. The large door slowly begins to swing open. Reichai and Saiyan stare in surprise as the forbidden door opens before them. A procession of robed figures emerges from the doorway, carrying a massive netted sphere with a seal engraving. Their feet shuffle in unison as they carry their heavy burden. Saiyan watches the strange procession, wondering what they are. Saiyan identifies the strange figures as Shikigami. He recalls seeing them before at the Imperial Villa, where they would crumble into nothing at his touch. Suddenly, one of the carriers calls out that a branch is snagged. A new person, Yozen, walks along the top of the cargo to fix the problem, noticing Saiyan and Reichai as he does. With a sudden leap, Yozen lands in front of them, startling both Saiyan and Reichai. Yozen addresses Reichai, asking if Saiyan is the new ward Prince Zemu took in. Reichai introduces the man as Yozen, the gardener, who has served the longest at the daytime castle. Yozen leans in unsettlingly close to Saiyan, takes a deep sniff, and comments that he smells roses. Startled, Saiyan thinks to himself that this person bears a slight resemblance to Raoe. The thought triggers a horrifying memory of Raoe's mangled and bloody face. Saiyan's heart thumps in his chest from the sudden, jarring memory. Yozen watches the boy's reaction with a sinister chuckle. Yozen laughs, calling Zemu dumb for taking Saiyan in, while Reichai demands to know what he means. Yozen's expression turns serious. He addresses Saiyan as Little Prince, and asks him directly if he has seen a Kaihen with his eyes. The question leaves Saiyan stunned and unable to respond. Reichai tries to intervene, telling Yozen that Saiyan is still in recovery. Yozen dismisses her concern and leaps back onto the moving cargo. Reichai curses the maverick gardener, while Saiyan quietly admits to himself that he has indeed seen something. The memory of the event surfaces, showing him standing before a crowd of robed figures. His mind flashes back to a hall filled with bodies, a lone figure standing at the end. Reichai tries to snap Saiyan out of it, dismissing Yozen as a garden hermit freak. Saiyan, shaken, wonders aloud about Yozen being a wizard and an enchanter who only wants to tend gardens, as Reichai mutters that everyone is nuts. Yozen's question echoes in his mind, was that a Kaihen? In the lonely hallway, the most haunting question of all surfaces, why was he the only survivor? On a grand staircase, a magical portal begins to form. With a flash, the portal deposits its passenger. An elderly woman lands deftly on the stairs, having arrived through magical means. The woman grumbles about the castle being a pain, as she can never choose her entry point. She resolves to find the valuables before she's discovered. Meanwhile, Reichai senses Saiyan's distress, confirming her suspicion that something is wrong and asking if he remembered something bad. Saiyan asks Reichai if she has ever witnessed a Kaihen, to which she replies she hasn't. Reichai explains that, according to Kabu, anyone at the heart of a Kaihen is vaporized, and only those who flee quickly survive. The explanation strikes a chord with Saiyan, who thinks of his prince. Saiyan's mind races, wondering why he was apart from Raoe during the incident. His eyes begin to throb as he wonders if he might have done something. Reichai looks at him, confused by his strange behavior. Nearby, the elderly thief sniffs the air, declaring she smells treasure in this room. As Reichai suggests Saiyan rest, the thief opens a door right behind them. Reichai gasps as the elderly thief suddenly appears before them. Reichai furiously accuses the rat hag of sneaking in again, but the woman laughs it off, claiming she's just visiting. Reichai shouts that she's a thief who came to steal treasure. The woman's gaze falls upon Saiyan, noting that she's never seen him before and that he seems to be hidden by powerful spells. The thief's face begins to transform as she sniffs the air, declaring she smells something. Saiyan watches in shock as she transforms, while Rachel uncivilly remarks that this is her true nature. The thief declares that her nose can't be fooled, she smells mana greater than any gem. Her realization dawns as she stares at Saiyan. He possesses the evil eye and a powerful one. The monstrous thief looms over Saiyan and Rachel, her eyes fixated on her prize. Her clawed hand glows as she prepares to attack. A chill runs down Saiyan's spine as he realizes she is going directly for his eye. Saiyan knows this is bad and prepares himself for the attack. A protective barrier suddenly flares to life around Saiyan, blocking the thief's attack. As she recoils, stunned by the unexpected defense, Saiyan looks down at his own hands, equally surprised. The thief, recovering from her shock, laughs mockingly, calling him naive and declaring that those treasures are hers. The thief realizes with shock that it's not just one evil eye, but both of Saiyan's eyes that possess this rare power. Suddenly, a thicket of thorny vines erupts from the ground, wrapping around Saiyan and protecting him from the thief's attack. The thief recoils, her spell blocked by the unexpected barrier. Seeing her friend in danger, Rachel puts the emergency whistle to her lips and blows with all her might. The sound of the emergency whistle echoes throughout the castle. Its inhabitants recognize the signal with alarm. Undeterred, the thief Susanagi scoffs as Rachel rushes towards the commotion, leaving Saiyan trapped in the thorny prison. Saiyan examines the rose barrier surrounding him. Susanagi recognizes the magic as Zemu's work, sneering that it's no wonder the boy is so sheltered. She fumes at Zemu for daring to hide such a treasure from her. Rachel warns Saiyan to get away, telling him the old hag is not to be trusted. Susanagi merely laughs, retorting that no wizard ever is law-abiding. As Susanagi prepares another spell, Zemu's voice rings out. He appears at the end of the hall, his presence immediately halting the conflict. Saiyan's eyes widen as he sees the master of the house arrive. As Zemu appears, surrounded by a glowing magical sigil, he sternly commands Susanagi to cease bringing conflict and violence into his castle. The vagabond wizard, Susanagi, scoffs at Zemu's grand entrance but notes that his behavior hides something sinister. She then reveals a shocking truth. Saiyan possesses the same underworld eyes as Zemu's own powerful right eye. Zemu, ignoring her, turns to the boy and suspiciously questions how he acquired such power, leaving Saiyan utterly confused. Susanagi explains that divine eyes allow one to cross into the realm of gods, and that Saiyan's underworld eyes are a living treasure of ruin and creation. She insists that no one is simply born with such powerful eyes. She then accuses Zemu of creating a substitute for his own powerless right eye, questioning what sacrifices he made to do so. Zemu angrily tells her to stop her vile insinuations, while Susanagi muses that he wouldn't risk his seat on the council for such power. Susanagi presses further, asking Zemu if a kaihen recently occurred in his magical domain. She cackles, believing she's uncovered a massive secret. The kaihen was divine retribution from the cursed flying country. She gloats about the story she now has, branding Saiyan a cursed child who brings disaster, which provokes Zemu to yell at her to shut up. Zemu tries to dismiss her, saying the story is too much for her to handle. Susanagi laughs, revealing that memory manipulation won't work on her and that he'll have to negotiate for her silence. She explains that her rat-like wand has already recorded the news and synced it with other hidden documents. Hearing her words about divine retribution, Saiyan slumps to his knees and begs her to take back her claims. He specifically pleads for her to retract her statement about a cursed child bringing disaster. Zemu accuses Susanagi of craving chaos over truth, warning her that careless words invite misfortune. He then stands firmly before the kneeling Saiyan, declaring the boy is his apprentice and that nobody shall meddle with him, promising punishment for any who try. Susanagi is surprised to hear that Zemu has already formed a contract with the boy. Suddenly, the doors behind them are blasted open. The ceiling begins to crumble around Zemu's group, startling them. Shimao, the one-eyed creature, zips into the room, announcing that it heard the whistle and came slithering. Taking advantage of the chaos, Susanagi slashes a portal to make her escape. She muses that the other members of the Seven Colors will pay handsomely for the information about the underworld eyes. With a final shout of victory, she vanishes into her portal. From a balcony above, the gardener Yozen watches the scene unfold, noting that the prince's secret was discovered quickly. In the quiet aftermath, the group stands amidst the debris. Rei-Chai reflects on the weight of Zemu's declaration. He called Saiyan his apprentice. Saiyan, still on his knees, apologizes to his new master. Zemu looks down at him, expressing regret that he couldn't have given him a little more freedom. Zemu tells Saiyan that while he is a great wizard, this was the best he could do, adding that Saiyan's previous wizard was impressive for hiding him so long. Zemu quietly wonders if it is his fault. Saiyan, echoing the sentiment, asks if everything is his own fault. He looks down at the rubble, the memory of a past bloody scene flashing in his mind. Tears well up in his eyes as he grapples with his guilt. Zemu gently reassures Saiyan that it's not his fault. He tells him there's no need to cry with those special eyes. Far away, Susanagi flies off, relishing the turbulent times ahead now that she knows about the boy with two underworld eyes. She sees this as her chance to finally move up in the world. The news spreads, and at Shiki Castle, someone exclaims that the location has finally been found. The wizard from Shiki Castle muses over the fact that the boy is Zemu's apprentice, but decides she'll figure it out. The news reaches Gyumi Castle. There, a wizard considers that her choices have multiplied, hoping she can see a certain person again. At Ruhai Castle, another powerful wizard receives the news. He listens in silence, contemplating the implications. The information has also reached the spires of Bokushin Castle. Atop a magnificent white dragon, the soil-black wizard Kitsu surveys the waters before Bokushin Castle, the news having reached even this remote domain. A young man named Yusen rushes to his master, calling out to him. He excitedly reports that Zemu, or Greenie, has finally taken on an apprentice. Yusen elaborates that the apprentice is rumored to be a cursed child from the flying country, possessing two underworld eyes. Kitsu asks for the source of this intelligence. Yusen confirms it was the old rat lady for 3 first-class gems, proudly adding that he beat the price down. Kitsu praises Yusen's purchase, noting that Susanagi only puts high prices on credible information. He decides they must keep an eye on the child, believing he might be a vessel for the destroyer. Yusen asks for clarification, wanting to know if he means that destroyer. Kitsu, the soil-black wizard, confirms his fears. He's talking about the wizard killer. Zemu firmly announces that the boy Saiyan is his apprentice. His decree is clear, no one is to meddle with the boy. The weight of this pronouncement is reflected in Saiyan's wide eyes. As they settle down, Reichai brings refreshments, asking Saiyan if he is hungry. Zemu complains to Reichai about not getting any snacks, but she bluntly tells him he does not need any. Zemu protests, claiming that even if he doesn't need to eat, the atmosphere is important for an immortal, a claim Reichai finds amusing. Reichai whispers to Zemu, telling him to do a good job now that he's taken on this responsibility. She encourages him, suggesting that since Saiyan is weak, Zemu can just push through with sheer force, much to Zemu's confusion. Reichai departs, telling the two to take their time. Zemu watches her go, wondering about her strange behavior, while Saiyan takes a sip of his tea. The tea is too hot, and Saiyan reacts with a pained shout. Zemu warns Saiyan that because Susanagi has found him out, news of his power will reach the furthest corners of the magic world, and they will have to deal with the ensuing trouble. Saiyan looks up at his new master and asks if his eyes are really that rare. Saiyan looks up, asking if Zemu is referring to his eyes. Zemu solemnly confirms that it is said there are no other eyes like his in the world. He elaborates that their specialty lies in containing magic formulas for special spells beyond just their mana capacity. The implication dawns on Saiyan, who asks if this power includes the ability to resurrect the dead. Zemu offers to explain the matter in more detail. He defines mana as the force that bends logic, with magic formulas being the rules that control it. Zemu introduces the 3 main divine veins that are difficult to interfere with: time, space, and life. These veins are like locked realms, and Zemu reveals that Saiyan was born with the keys to all 3. The ability to use all 3 keys to bring the dead back from nothingness is why they are called underworld eyes. Zemu continues, explaining that because they can be physically stolen like gems, any wizard would covet them for their power to make the impossible possible. But he cautions that in the wrong hands, this power could lead to the world's destruction and incur the wrath of the Celestial Emperor. The gravity of the situation settles on Saiyan. Saiyan realizes with dawning horror that it was his fault his country was destroyed, remembering a vague urge to use some kind of power. Zemu tries to console him, stating that kaihens or magical anomalies can occur even when he is not around. However, he stresses that Saiyan must still consider himself capable of such immense power. Zemu explains that he declared Saiyan his apprentice so that average wizards won't dare to mess with him, and it should be enough to keep even the 7 colors in check if they are sensible. He adds that while the eyes can't be used if taken from a living owner, Saiyan would still face unnecessary hardship, which he wants to avoid. Zemu clarifies that this is just a means to an end. He's not asking Saiyan to truly become his apprentice, they can just pretend. Saiyan looks at him, understanding that this was all done for his protection. Saiyan speaks up, stating firmly that he doesn't want to be someone who always needs to be protected. Zemu looks at him, considering his words, and asks if he is willing to accept his guidance. Saiyan looks resolute, saying he'd like to ask something first. He asks Zemu if his own eyes are the same as Zemu's right eye. Zemu confirms that a long time ago, his eye was indeed the same. Saiyan then asks a critical question: has Zemu ever succeeded in bringing someone back from the dead? With a slight smile, Zemu admits that he has come close. Saiyan absorbs this information, his expression unreadable. Saiyan formally agrees to follow Zemu's instructions, asking his new master to go easy on him. Back inside, Saiyan apologetically informs the staff that he is excused from his cleaning duties from now on. Raichai notes his proper demeanor while the chef wishes him good luck, and Saiyan thanks them as he dashes out. The others discuss the news of Saiyan's wizard training, while Raichai notes that she can still borrow him for chores. She thinks to herself that he is lucky. Saiyan walks with determination across a wide paved area, following the small, masked creature Shimo. As Saiyan approaches, Zemu stands ready with his weapon. Suddenly, Zemu hurls the small creature Shimo directly at a startled Saiyan. Zemu follows up by slamming the butt of his scythe into the ground with a powerful thud. Saiyan quickly hops back, dodging the initial assault. Zemu's weapon strikes Shimo, who has transformed into a shield. Saiyan uses a hand sign to manipulate the shield, successfully blocking the attack. Zemu unleashes a rapid series of smaller projectiles, forcing Saiyan to deflect them in a flurry. Zemu's weapon glows as he prepares another attack. With quick hand signs, Saiyan reinforces the shield against Zemu's relentless assault. The training comes to an abrupt halt as Zemu's weapon stops just short of Saiyan's face. Zemu addresses the boy, noting that his skills are purely defensive, a fact Shimo comments is a good thing. A magical sigil gleams behind Zemu as he prepares to instruct his new student. Suddenly, a massive attack slices through the air, aimed directly at their location. The explosion sends them tumbling, and a shocked Zemu realizes they are under attack. A horned wizard with a wild grin appears amidst the destruction, laughing as he declares himself the first to crash the party. He is Basin, the wizard of lightning strike Yahello. Zemu looks toward Shakutan Castle. An onlooker screams in disbelief at the sudden intrusion. Basin greets Zemu casually after making his destructive entrance, announcing he's here to hang out. Zemu scolds Basin for his destructive entrance, while Basin argues that it was necessary. Basin reveals he heard rumors that Zemu has finally taken on an apprentice. His attention falls upon the boy hiding behind Zemu. Saiyan nervously asks Zemu if he should greet the newcomer. Zanka addresses her master, Basin. She questions why Basin is wasting time and urges him to wrap up his business. Zanka lands, her presence intimidating. Her gaze falls on Zemu and Saiyan as she questions if this visit is worth the effort. Basin teases Zemu about his choice of avatar, which Zemu rebuffs. Zanka tells her master to stop his unwarranted remarks. Zemu explains to Saiyan that their guests are the Wizard of Yellow and his apprentice, assuring him that he is safe. Basin laughs, charmed by the Saiyan politely introduces himself, and Basin enthusiastically returns the greeting. Basin asks Saiyan if he's had a tough life up until now. Saiyan thanks him for his concern, but says he lacks the experience to compare his life to anything else. Impressed, Basin asks Zemu how he trained the boy, but Zemu dismisses the question. Seeing Saiyan's interest, Basin asks if he wants to touch his horns. Zanka gives her permission, telling Saiyan to be gentle. Saiyan gently touches a horn, exclaiming how smooth and amazing it is. Zemu explains that draconids are proud of their horns, as Basin asks if Zemu wants to touch them too. Zanka bluntly states she would break them if she were allowed to touch them. Zemu agrees to listen to what Basin has to say and invites him inside. Basin introduces himself to Saiyan and asks for his name. Saiyan apologetically explains that he has lost his memory and cannot remember his name. Basin takes the news in stride, thinking it's cool. Basin tells Zanka to wait quietly with Saiyan, but she retorts that Basin is the one who caused all the damage. Zemu instructs a servant to ensure no one else trespasses. Saiyan and Zanka wait outside while the two wizards talk. Inside a private room, Basin calls out to Zemu. He immediately questions why Zemu hasn't formed an official contract with his new apprentice. Basin is shocked that Zemu hasn't even gotten the boy's true seal, which would reveal his name, but Zemu insists he is still just a child. Zemu explains that he finds Saiyan to be a fragile being and doesn't want to use magic that probes his inner depths. Basin is furious at Zemu's calm demeanor, exclaiming that the boy is a ticking time bomb without a contract. He urges Zemu to form a contract right away, warning that it is dangerous if another wizard claims him first. Basin points out that Saiyan has already used his divine eyes once, which likely caused his amnesia. He stresses that this means Saiyan can use his powers untaught, and asks Zemu what he plans to do. Zemu calmly replies that he will do nothing, as the decision rests with Saiyan. Zemu insists his job is to protect Saiyan's choices, but Basin questions if he can actually do it. Basin argues that Saiyan is no average gem user. He reminds Zemu that other wizards who lost partners are deeply interested in the power of underworld eyes. He warns that Purple has been searching for them and might make a move. Zemu confirms he is aware, recalling that she once came to verify that his right eye had gone blind. Basin speculates that other wizards like Red and Blue might also be tempted by the power of resurrection. Zemu questions why Basin isn't acting as freely as the others, then asks for his theory on why the Kaihen occurred. Basin is taken aback by the question, unable to answer immediately. Zemu reveals his belief that Kaihens are the world's form of revenge. Reichai prepares to bring tea to the guests. Zanka waits impatiently outside the room. Saiyan admits to Reichai that he finds Zanka scary, and Reichai agrees before deciding to bring her the tea. Zanka waits on a couch as a knock sounds at the door. Saiyan enters and announces that he has brought tea. Zanka is surprised he knows how to serve tea, assuming he comes from a distinguished family. Saiyan explains that he learned manners by observing those who served him. Zanka bluntly states that his answer rubs her the wrong way. Saiyan asks if she means him or his upbringing. She replies both, expressing her disdain for royal education. Saiyan understands and offers to leave if his presence makes her uncomfortable. Zanka stops him, telling him to wait. Zanka suddenly grabs Saiyan by the chin, startling him. She explains that though her master warned her, she is curious about his divine eyes. She examines his eyes up close, remarking on the beauty of the 3 vortex pupils. Peeking from the doorway, Reichai realizes that what Zanka truly wants to see is the power behind those eyes. Zanka smiles, mentioning the rumor that his eyes are connected to the underworld. She leans in close and demands that he open his eyes now and show her their power. A spilled cup of tea trembles on the floor. Zanka holds Saiyan's face, her grip firm, and demands that he open his divine eyes. Saiyan's eyes are wide with shock and apprehension under her intense gaze. She taunts him with a cruel smirk, asking if he is incapable of using his power. Saiyan trembles, pointing out that she was the one who told him to open them. Zanka questions if this is how one uses the power of divine eyes. As she stares into them, she senses a familiar failing. Suddenly, Reichai bursts through the door, shouting for her to stop. Reichai furiously declares that Saiyan is their precious apprentice and warns Zanka against harming him. Zanka's expression darkens, threatening Reichai to stay out of it. Reichai flinches, taken aback by the intensity of the threat. To everyone's surprise, Saiyan calmly tells Reichai to stay back, thanking him for his concern. Reichai tries desperately to get past the door that has slammed shut. Saiyan tells Zanka that it's all so clear now. He explains that the counterattack spell on him isn't activating because she doesn't actually wish to harm him. Zanka challenges him, asking if he thinks she is bluffing. Saiyan simply says no, his face still held firmly in her grasp. Basin asks what Zemu means by the world's revenge. Zemu explains that 1,000 years of unrestrained magic use is warping the world, and the repercussions are now visible. He suggests the boy's eyes might be one such iteration. He reveals that while only one underworld eye should exist at a time, 2 have manifested in the boy. As dark energy flows from Saiyan's eyes, Zemu explains that the resulting power is multiplied far beyond simple doubling. He admits to Basin that he doesn't know what to make of the ticking time bomb. Meanwhile, Zanka resolves to, at the very least, keep him from going off. A swirling vortex of darkness begins to emanate from Saiyan's eye. As Zanka holds him, the power of the underworld eyes is unleashed, transforming Saiyan's eyes into swirling black voids. The entire castle shakes violently, and Reichai bursts in on a large creature, screaming for Zemu. She frantically tells him that the newbie Saiyan needs help. A magical ping alerts Zemu to a problem. He realizes with shock that the protective spell he cast on the boy has been broken. Zemu calls to Basin, who immediately understands and agrees to help. He holds Rachel back, telling her not to follow. The two wizards rush toward the disturbance. Rachel and his mount are left behind amidst the debris. They find Saiyan's headless body suspended inside a spiked, crystalline prison created by Zanka. Basin shouts Zanka's name as Zanka apologizes to Zemu, the Lord Wizard of Green. She admits she provoked Saiyan and then tried to halt the magic partway through. Zemu calmly takes charge, telling Zanka he will take over and to break her spell. She complies, dispelling the prison, and Saiyan's body begins to fall. Zemu catches the boy's body gently as Basin looks on. Looking down at the disembodied neck, he speaks softly, asking Saiyan if he remembers his voice and telling him to come back. The swirling vortex of dark energy above Saiyan's neck begins to coalesce. The energy reforms and his head reappears. Zemu praises him as Basin and Zanka watch in amazement, with Zanka remarking that he should be fine. Zemu reflects that while the boy listens, there is no knowing what he will do next. Cradling the now sleeping boy, Zemu sighs, remarking that this child is a real handful. Later, as the group flies away, Basin expresses relief that things turned out all right, calling it a narrow miss. Zemu scolds Zanka, grounding her from using magic for the foreseeable future. He reminds her that he told her to get along with the poor kid. Saiyan awakens and tells Zanka he was careless, mistaking her for a child with power she couldn't handle. He acknowledges her skill as the top apprentice of the Wizard of Yellow. In a flashback, Saiyan asks Zanka to be his accomplice. He explains that he knows what it takes to open his divine eyes, but has always stopped himself. He confesses his desire to wield their power as soon as he can. He explains that his master always pulls back from teaching him, and that, like her, he doesn't want to hurt people. Saiyan proposed a deal, asking her to stop him before he caused serious damage so they could pass it off as a joke. He gave her the option to refuse if the burden was too heavy. Zanka listened, considering the audacious proposal. He then asked her for a final decision on his plan. Back in the present, Basin remarks he liked Saiyan better when he was just a kid. Zanka, however, is impressed, stating she's never seen a bomb with such a good upbringing and that he doesn't need sympathy. Zemu sighs, noting that if a former bomb like Basin thinks this will be hard, it must be true, as Basin irritably tells him not to call him that. In a grand, floating castle, Saiyan blinks awake in bed, disoriented from a recent ordeal. He jolts upright as a fragmented memory returns. Suddenly, Zemu is looming over him, demanding to know if the boy realizes what he has done. Confused, Saiyan can only ask who the stranger is, earning an exasperated cry from Zemu. Zemu begins to lecture Saiyan, reminding him of when he was first found in the garden. As the lecture drones on, Saiyan's memory returns. He realizes he must have opened his divine eyes. Zemu declares that this means it is time for the real lecturing to begin, much to Saiyan's dismay. Sent to his room without dinner, Saiyan sits alone in the dark, contemplating his situation. He now understands that opening his divine eyes causes him to lose his memory, a harsh side effect. Though the shock of remembering his former Master Rao's death is fainter this time. His desire to see her again remains unchanged. His thoughts are interrupted when Raichai announces her entry. Saiyan is surprised to see her, and she asks what he wants. She explains she was told to bring him his dinner. He cautiously asks if he's allowed to eat, prompting a concerned Raichai to ask if he's okay. She admits she doesn't know the details, but it sounds like he had a tough time. When Raichai asks how he is physically, Saiyan feels he's taken 1 step forward and 2 steps back. He replies that nothing hurts, but notes that this conversation feels familiar. He then realizes Raichai has been worried about him from the very beginning. He looks at her with sincere regret and apologizes. Raichai asks why he is apologizing, and Saiyan explains it's because he has made her life so hard. He wonders aloud if he truly is a cursed child. Raichai responds by sharing her country's creation story. The tale speaks of a traveling man and an evil-eyed witch who had a child with divine eyes, who eventually became the first king. Saiyan silently reflects that this king must have been the result of everyone wishing for an ideal leader. Raichai tells Saiyan that based on the story, his powers aren't his fault. Saiyan agrees but says he is still responsible for his actions. He tells Raichai that she must run away if she ever finds herself in danger because of him. He admits, however, that her desire to protect him makes him very happy. As Raichai leaves, she reflects on her conversation with Saiyan. She thinks it's nice he's in a position where escape is possible. Still, she wishes she could have been on his side. Elsewhere, Zemu begins Saiyan's training, warning him not to do anything he hasn't been taught. Saiyan quietly agrees. Zemu thinks Saiyan has eyes that say he'll do what he wants regardless of warnings. Saiyan has the exact same thought about Zemu. Zemu begins the lesson, forming a symbol with his fingers and asking if Saiyan can see the swirling energy. Saiyan looks on in awe, identifying it as mana. Zemu explains that normally, only immortals or those with divine eyes can see mana. Other practitioners like Rao or Susanagi could only perceive it through other senses. He reminds Saiyan that magic is about imposing rules on this raw mana. As Saiyan watches, the mana arranges itself into a controlled pattern. Zemu instructs Saiyan to cultivate the habit of keeping it under constant control, noting that seeing it should speed up his mastery. Zemu demonstrates his control over the mana. He instantly grows a patch of grass, and Saiyan watches amazed. Then, just as quickly, the mana surges and the grass withers. Saiyan is shocked as the grass turns to dust and dies before his eyes. Zemu warns that raw mana is violent, especially toward living things. However, he explains that if kept under control, it won't be hostile. He prepares several patches of grass, telling Saiyan to practice releasing mana without killing them. Zemu strictly forbids him from practicing anywhere but this designated area. He asks if Saiyan understands the gravity of his words, and Saiyan gulps, acknowledging the warning. Zemu states he won't teach him anything further until this is mastered. Saiyan is left alone to begin his training on the tiled ground. From a balcony, Zemu watches over him as he trains. Basin approaches, stating that if Zemu is taking responsibility for raising the boy, he'll leave it at that. Basin advises Zemu to avoid a showdown with the other 7 colors, though Zemu notes Basin's own impulsiveness. Basin warns him to especially watch out for the older of the Black Brothers. Basin identifies this threat as Kietsu, whose actions are troubling. Zemu grows concerned, noting that Kietsu seems interested in the boy, but his intentions are unclear. As Saiyan struggles with his training, Zemu worries whether Kietsu intends to hunt the boy down before he grows up. Meanwhile, in the ruins of the flying country, a hooded figure stands before a strange, barren landscape. His companion uses a magical device to investigate. This is the older black brother, Kietsu, who remarks that the land's past records offer no new insights. Kietsu pulls out a unique magnifying glass, which shines as he peers through it. His gaze falls upon Saiyan, training far away. He stares intently, wondering if this is the boy he has been searching for. On a rooftop patio, Saiyan sits cross-legged, deep in concentration. He attempts to practice the mana control Zemu taught him, carefully drawing in the ambient mana. He tries to arrange it into a stable pattern above his finger, but his control is shaky. He mutters to himself, trying to focus as the construct wavers. He brings the mana down to the patch of grass, creating a small, stable ripple. Believing he's getting the hang of it, he lets his focus slip for a moment. Suddenly, the mana erupts from him uncontrollably. He loses focus and panics. The mana burst scorches the grass beneath him. Mortified, Saiyan realizes the mana burst came from his rear. As he reels from the discovery, he overhears other apprentices walking by, one of whom notes that being a great wizard's apprentice is bound to be difficult. Reichai scoffs that this is the most basic of training, and it's too soon for him to complain. Reichai offers some stern encouragement, telling him to remain diligent and keep pushing on. Saiyan privately thinks it's easy for her to say. He is driven by the fear of his rogue mana accidentally hurting someone. With renewed determination, he shouts that it's okay. Another apprentice cheers him on enthusiastically. This surprises both Saiyan and Reichai, who remarks that the quiet boy can talk when he feels like it. The scene shifts to memory from 3 years ago, at the imperial villa of the flying country. A procession carries a casket. A veiled figure urges Rao to get their wounds treated, warning of the damage magic inflicts, but Rao remains silent. A young prince, Saiyan's past self, is called out by an attendant. He peeks out from behind a pillar, excited that everyone has left. He eagerly runs to Rao, asking to be taught how to fly. Rao tells him he must first master self-defense, as he still cannot conjure a proper force field, though the prince claims he can. To prove their point, Rao easily shatters the prince's weak force field with a tap of their staff. Rao tells him the field is not enough to protect himself. Rao explains that force fields have countless practical uses depending on their form and strength. They emphasize that he must develop the muscle memory to react instantly in a crisis. Rao explains that knowing how to respond to an opponent's technique is crucial. They implore the young prince to never give up and seize every opportunity. Rao tells him he is the country's only treasure. They instill in him the belief that there is nothing he cannot do. Back in the present, Saiyan finally understands why Rao focused so much on self-defense. He realizes that in his current state, casting spells outside is too risky, and his powers feel stronger. He wonders why his force fields have become so weak and easily shattered. He attempts to create a force field, but is horrified to see his mana still leaking out. As his mana leaks and destroys another patch of turf, Saiyan cries out in frustration. He looks up to see a figure floating nearby on a staff. He recognizes the gardener Zemu, who he thinks looks a little like Rao. Panicked, Saiyan warns him to stay away, but Zemu simply points at the ruined turf. Zemu states calmly that he grew the turf. Saiyan realizes Zemu has been using magic to transport fresh patches of grass from the garden for his training. Zemu explains this happens every day, with the turf withering by sunset. Saiyan apologizes, but Zemu dismisses it, saying that creating gardens is his job. He calls it a necessary sacrifice for the young prince's growth. Saiyan asks Zemu what to do about the mana leaking from such an undignified place. Zemu explains that with so much mana, it's bound to leak out, and he must learn to contain it within his body. Saiyan finds the idea of containing it all inside him preposterous, which makes Zemu laugh. Impressed, Saiyan wonders if there is anything the gardener cannot do. Zemu flies off, telling him see ya. Saiyan asks if he can see Zemu's garden, but Zemu says next time. Saiyan remembers that Rach had suggested he ask the gardener about the gardens. Zemu promises he can visit once he succeeds, motivating Saiyan to do his best. Later, an eye patch-wearing wizard observes Saiyan's training. Saiyan has learned to contain his mana, which now radiates from his body in controlled ripples. The wizard notes that while he has accomplished control, he must now learn to stop releasing it from his body entirely. The wizard advises him to master this state of control, so he can do it unconsciously. The wizard asks Saiyan what he has realized from his training. Saiyan replies that he understands now how violent his power was, and that Rao's focus on his attitude was meant to make him worthy of it. The wizard agrees, adding that he has been thinking too. He tells Saiyan that spells are cast from the heart, puzzling the boy. The wizard elaborates that while belief can unlock unexpected power, it's a gray area. He reminds Saiyan of Rao's empowering words, "There is nothing you cannot do." He explains that for someone like Saiyan, a well-structured restraining technique is more beneficial. He concludes that magic is not just about the heart, it is something that influences the world itself. The wizard presents Saiyan with a choice: use his power to change the world himself or someone else. As Saiyan ponders what he wants to change, the wizard asks if he has an inkling of which path to take. With a smile, the wizard formally welcomes him to the world of wizards. In the bustling mess hall of Shakyutin Castle, Saiyan thanks the staff as he eagerly grabs his meal. Megi, a goat-like apprentice, hands Saiyan a wrapped lunch, much to the prince's delight. Watching him, Reicha and another apprentice remark on his simple joy, noting that his old castle only had a small garden. Saiyan looks forward to a tour of the gardens, as he and Megi walk through a long hallway. Saiyan asks about a package Megi is carrying, which contains steamed buns for his master. Megi confirms that his master, Yozen, is on his way to becoming an immortal, which is why he barely eats. Saiyan wonders aloud if Megi doesn't want Yozen to become immortal. Megi confesses his fear that once Yozen ascends, he will go somewhere far away where Megi can no longer learn from him. Saiyan tells Megi he doesn't find immortals to be distant, but Megi suggests it's because Saiyan is practically one of them. They arrive at the open doors of a large building within the garden. Megi proudly announces that this is the largest garden, which Saiyan recognizes from his first day at the castle. Megi explains that an open garden door is a sign of welcome, a fact that surprises Saiyan. As they walk, Saiyan marvels at the huge trees, and Megi notes that the ones in the center of the castle are even bigger. Saiyan is left speechless by the breathtaking view of a pagoda situated in the middle of a vast pond. He runs ahead, excitedly pointing out the pond. His attention is drawn to a lone figure, sitting serenely inside a circular window of the pagoda. The figure is revealed to be Gardener Yozen, who calmly smokes a long pipe. Megi calls out to his boss, announcing their arrival with the prince. Yozen turns to them with a welcoming smile, noting that it has been a long time since he last received a guest. Megai questions being called a guest, but Yozen teases him, explaining it's only because the lord of the castle rarely invites visitors. Megai sets down the lunch, telling the little prince they should enjoy the garden while they eat. Yozen takes a puff from his pipe and blows a swirling cloud of smoke towards Saiyan. Saiyan watches, confused, as the smoke from Yozen's pipe drifts past him. He looks out towards the pond, wondering aloud if there was always mist over it. A thick fog born from the smoke begins to roll across the water's surface. Suddenly, the tree on the island bursts into brilliant white foliage. Saiyan gasps in surprise at the magical transformation. Amused by his reaction, Megai tells Saiyan to look out the back window. Saiyan turns and sees a mountain range appearing through the window. He exclaims in shock at the sight of the mountains. He marvels at how lush and green the landscape is and how vast the pond now seems. A flock of birds takes flight over the illusory waters. Watching the scene unfold, Saiyan quietly says that he likes the window. He and Megai sit before the window, enjoying their meal while taking in the stunning view. The landscape outside the window changes again, showing the vibrant colors of autumn foliage. Then the scene transforms once more, revealing a snow-covered mountain range as soft flakes begin to fall. As Saiyan stares at the changing seasons, Yozen approaches from behind and asks which window is his favorite. Saiyan answers with a smile that he likes spring. He explains that where he comes from, the winters are harsh. Yozen uses his pipe again, and the smoke drifts toward the bare branches of the tree outside. As the smoke envelops them, the branches miraculously sprout and bloom with spring flowers. A magical breeze blows through the room, filling the air with a storm of flower petals. Saiyan watches the spring breeze, a single petal landing gently in his hair. Megai cheers with delight at the beautiful spectacle. The sight triggers a memory for Saiyan, showing two figures standing beneath a blossoming tree. Saiyan correctly identifies the magical display as an illusion. Yozen confirms this, impressed that the little prince could tell so easily. Saiyan explains that the specters from his old home used to show him illusions just like these. Megai muses that it makes sense for specters in an old building to excel at illusions, as Saiyan adds that he thinks they once served a witch. The mention of witches catches Megai completely by surprise. Saiyan recalls a tale he heard about his former home, the Imperial Villa, which was once a dwelling for witches. He explains that they used spells to make it a wondrous place to entertain kings. But he says sadly, his birth led to the last witch being left alone, and the villa became an empty husk. Yozen comments that it's a shame the illusions aren't a new experience for the prince. Saiyan quickly disagrees, insisting that the illusions are wonderful and that he has missed them. He begins to reminisce about the end of the long winters from his past. He remembers how a feeling of spring would fill the air, a memory tied to the witch. Saiyan recalls how the air would change with the season, and it felt like the witch's expression would soften. He explains that the illusions remind him of a happier time in his life. Megai watches Saiyan, thinking to himself how sad the boy seems for a child. Yozen continues to observe Saiyan, a thoughtful look on his face. Yozen asks Saiyan if he remembers the large tree that was being moved recently. Saiyan confirms, recalling the very big tree being carried by a group of men. Yozen reveals that he is using that tree to create a springtime garden and promises to show it to Saiyan when he is finished eating. The memory continues from 5 years ago, in the Imperial Villa of the Flying Country. Tauka, young Saiyan's attendant, notes the chill in the air and suggests they end the illusion showing for the day. She asks if he'd prefer to see something beautiful or strong. The young prince, pensive, requests a battle he hasn't witnessed before. Suddenly, a powerful voice calls out for Tauka. A regal spectre appears before them. As the young prince looks up, Tauka quickly shields his eyes, warning him not to look directly at her. She reminds him that his eyes are special, and he must not look directly at a spectre if he chooses not to wear his hood. The spectre addresses Tauka by name, asking if anything unusual occurred during the illusion battles of King Sung's reign. The spectre turns her attention to the young prince and offers to show him something scary. Tauka expresses concern, questioning if such a thing is appropriate for a spring night near bedtime. But Saiyan boldly declares that he isn't scared of anything. The spectre agrees to show him the illusionary battles of King Sung and something scary, a fleeting dream for the night. As the magic swirls, Saiyan notes the faint smell of peaches. Tendrils of magic weave through the air around the Imperial Villa. The first combatant, a wizard from Team White, steps up and brandishes a heart-shaped staff. A giant snake materializes in the courtyard, hissing menacingly before Saiyan and Tauka. While another attendant remarks that most people dislike snakes, the young prince is thrilled by the sight. Next, the first player from Team Black leaps into the fray. A massive, shimmering sword appears, towering over the building. Saiyan questions the new illusion, and Tauka notes that the sight of such a sharp blade might give chills to those who have suffered from one. The sword then slashes down, narrowly missing them. Tauka admits it was a bit unfair but effective at getting the message across, as Saiyan looks on in shock. The illusions shift to writhing, unknown shadowy creatures, and Tauka comments that nothing is scarier than the unknown. The scene changes to the feeling of being submerged, and Saiyan notes that it doesn't feel like real water. Tauka explains that the accuracy depends on the illusion, but his eyes are too sharp. Tauka asks if he's having fun, and Saiyan confirms that he is, even if it isn't scary. The Spectre then announces the grand finale. The Spectre announces a joint performance between Black and White. A gigantic, textured moon forms in the sky, hanging impossibly close over the rooftops. The young prince stares up in silent, wide-eyed wonder. The illusionary moon gapes open, revealing itself to be a colossal, terrifying eyeball staring down at them, causing the young prince to shiver in fear. Saiyan snaps back to the present, the strange feeling of a surfacing memory lingering. He's interrupted by Yozen, who approaches him in a bamboo grove and asks what he's been doing. Yozen clarifies, asking about his training with Zemu. Saiyan calls it idle chit-chat, complaining that it feels like he's just enduring a barrage of complaints, which Yozen summarizes as classroom learning. Saiyan complains that Zemu attacks him with a staff whenever he relaxes his focus. He grumbles that the method is dirty, as Yozen announces their arrival. They stand before a vast, empty space with a single barren tree at its center, which Saiyan recognizes as the Garden of Spring. Saiyan questions if this is really a garden, and Yozen explains that it's still a work in progress. Saiyan notices many charms on the branches, which Yozen explains are temporal control charms to stop the tree's growth when it blossoms. Saiyan remarks that he doesn't remember the tree looking like this, and Yozen proudly states it's because he tinkered with it. Yozen points out that he's introducing nutrients to make the branches nice and plump, leaving Saiyan at a loss for words. Saiyan recognizes the vials, remarking that he sees a lot of those things in the spring. Yozen asks Saiyan if he knows what kind of tree it is, revealing it to be a peach tree. He explains that peach trees don't normally live long enough to grow so large, but he grew it in a special place and is now fine-tuning its shape. Yozen tells Saiyan that all of this is possible because they are in an enchanted land. Saiyan is surprised to learn he's in an enchanted land. He muses that it explains the weirdness of the place, since an immortal lives there. Yozen points out that since Saiyan himself isn't from the mundane world, it might not be that different for him. Yozen adds that Zemu made the temporal control charms, which work especially well in his enchanted land. However, he cautions that since the tree is a living thing, there's no guarantee everything will go smoothly. Saiyan wonders aloud if everyone in the enchanted land will eventually become an immortal. Yozen replies that while most people in the castle are in training, there are also people like him who only got this far because they wanted to make gardens, adding that if this is all it takes, becoming immortal is no big deal. He looks at his work, admitting the garden is far from his ideal, and invites the little prince to come see it when the tree finally blossoms. Yozen promises that at night, the garden will open and become like a spring dream for everyone to enjoy. The phrase fleeting dream triggers Saiyan's memory of the Spectre from his childhood. He reflects that he can never go back to being the way he was then. Still, he tells Yozen he understands the goal is to bring a dreamlike garden to life, and he can't wait to see it. Saiyan suggests that if the goal is only to bring joy, an illusion should be enough, and Yozen agrees. But Yozen adds that he believes this is karma, postulating that perhaps becoming an immortal is the culmination of all that karma, leaving Saiyan to ponder his words. Hearing the word karma, Saiyan questions its meaning. The conversation continues as Saiyan and Yozen walk through a bamboo-lined path. Yozen clarifies he's referring to the act of making gardens. Saiyan, trying to grasp the concept, asks if the pursuit of mastering one thing is in itself a karmic act. Yozen turns the question back on Saiyan, asking why he thinks gardens exist. After a moment's hesitation, Saiyan answers that they are meant to be looked at. Yozen agrees, explaining that while gardens are often tools for the powerful, their purpose is to be seen and appreciated. He states that a garden no one sees has no value. He then admits that he himself creates gardens, even if nobody sees them. Curious, Saiyan asks if Yozen ever makes gardens just for himself, to which Yozen confirms he does. However, Yozen insists that he is, first and foremost, a gardener. He explains that the job of a top-rate gardener is to create for others. He muses that one could simply use illusions to achieve that goal, which would be gentler on the plants. Yozen declares he is not satisfied with mere illusions, and if his dedication removes him from the wheel of reincarnation, then so be it. The feeling of a spring breeze reminds Saiyan of his past. He recalls the specter from his castle, who said illusions were for making you forget reality. He contrasts the airy softness of her illusions with what he has just experienced. Saiyan tells Yozen that his creations felt real. He imagines the heart and soul Yozen must have poured into his work to become so capable, observing nature to achieve such realism. Having never experienced such accurate illusions, he praises Yozen as a first-rate worker. Yozen, however, suggests that true freedom is when a creator's personal feelings about their work no longer matter. Yozen smiles, calling Saiyan a scary kid with a silver tongue. He chuckles, remarking that Saiyan was truly raised to be a king. He admits that with Saiyan's capabilities, he himself might have chased grander ambitions. Yozen then confesses that his own heart secretly yearns to reshape the world exactly as he wants it to be. He elaborates on his desire to fix everything he finds ugly and bury anything in his way. He wants to remake the world into a form he can be satisfied with. He wonders aloud if his passion for creating gardens is a symptom of his inability to accept reality. As Saiyan mulls over the idea of not accepting reality, Yozen admits he has never been able to involve the world in his goals. He concludes that this is precisely why it's better that he doesn't master magic. The conversation triggers a memory for Saiyan, a warning that his eyes hold the power to bring back the dead, but that he must never use it. Saiyan asks if, in the end, illusions are not enough. After a moment of silence, Yozen confirms they aren't. Saiyan finally understands, realizing this relentless pursuit is what Yozen meant by karma. Yozen looks away, accepting that he'll never become the gardener he once dreamed of being. Later, back inside the castle, Saiyan eats with his attendants. Feeling he didn't have enough for lunch, he reaches for more fruit being offered by an attendant. A small, bear-like creature approaches, addressing him as boy. The archivist informs Saiyan that he has been tasked with preparing a room for him. The archivist leads Saiyan and his attendants through a hallway, arriving at a door marked Library 7. Rachel questions why he's being put in a library when there are plenty of servants' quarters available. The archivist explains that the master's libraries are protected by spells to prevent mold, making it a fine place to stay. Standing before the large door, Saiyan simply asks for the key. The key is a strange, insectoid object that transforms with a mechanical whir. Saiyan remarks on its wild shape as he inserts it into the lock. The heavy door creaks open, revealing a path of light into the dark, book-lined room beyond. Inside, Saiyan looks up in awe at the towering shelves filled with countless books. The archivist notes that this is one of the smaller libraries. As the attendants make up a bed for him in the center of the room, Saiyan looks around and decides it's not bad. Rachel shows him how to use the gem lamp and tells him to holler if he needs anything. She informs him that with his own room, he's now in charge of his own affairs. The other attendant excitedly invites the prince to the communal bath. Rachel instructs the attendant to show Saiyan to the latrine as well. Meanwhile, Zemu watches Yozen from a balcony, reflecting that he too lacks training. Atop the massive plant, Yozen tells Zemu he wants to show the divine-eyed kid the real thing. He muses that the evolving prince is exactly what the incomplete castle was missing. Zemu asks if he truly plans on making Saiyan a wizard. Yozen looks back, sensing that Zemu has a plan of his own. That night, Saiyan rests in his new library room. As he sleeps, a voice calls out to him. Elsewhere, a woman urges a hooded companion to hurry and greet a new arrival. Saiyan's dream takes a dark turn, presenting him with a vision of a man on a throne. The man's face is stern, with a familiar scar over his eye. Saiyan awakens with a start, his eyes wide with terror as he whispers a single word, "Father." In the northeast sector, amidst the northern burial mounds, lies Mount Yin. From a window, a door creaks open into the open air. Zemu holds a book, watching the portal. Zemu presses a small scroll, which activates with a magical hum. He summons a magnificent bird-like creature, instructing it to carry itself with grace as the official messenger of the Wizard of Forest Green. Zemu looks on as Saiyan announces he will begin. Saiyan quickly takes a stance. He channels magic, his eye glowing with power. In a flurry of motion, Saiyan throws his mana, conjuring magical constructs around the training area. The constructs coalesce, forming a large, intricate barrier before him. Zemu coolly instructs him to explain. Saiyan reports that for his assignment to conjure a shield barrier, he found it faster to channel mana directly from his eyes, leading him to create 3 types. He developed a square shield, which is the fastest and easiest to conjure. Next is a circular shield, which is quick to form and adequately strong. Finally, he created a hybrid shield that boasts decent speed and strength. Saiyan explains that while more complex shields use more mana, the difference feels negligible, though simpler frameworks would be easier for multiple castings. When Zemu asks for any other findings, Saiyan begins to explain what he learned about distance. He demonstrates that by throwing his mana, he can conjure shields in any location he can visually see. He concludes that he still has a lot to learn and needs more test runs. Zemu listens, acknowledging that the results are not bad for the most part. Saiyan declares that this means he has passed the test. He turns to Zemu, stating it's time to learn spells beyond mere self-defense. Saiyan admits it might be too soon for offensive magic, but Zemu doesn't think learning a few extra things would be dangerous. Zemu reminds him that building his own techniques is already an advanced skill, to Saiyan's surprise. He then pointedly adds that nothing is ever completely safe when it comes to Saiyan. Saiyan presses his case, suggesting he should at least learn to fly like Zemu, who promptly decides to move on. Zemu tells him to put out his hands, and a shimmering object appears before him. Saiyan marvels at the beautiful, shining object that lands in his palm. Zemu explains that it is a first-class gem, a stone containing an inherent but as yet unawakened magical formula. Zemu's voice echoes in Saiyan's mind, revealing his next challenge. The challenge is to awaken the slumbering gem. Back in his library room, Saiyan flops onto his bed, having failed to get a reaction from the stone by calling to it or striking it. He admires the beautiful stone. Noting its pale blue color reminds him of Raoi's right eye. This triggers a memory of his father's own evil eye. Saiyan recalls that it wasn't quite white. Instead, it gleamed as if alive with 7 different colored fires, and the sight of it always made his body tense. He wonders why he isn't keen on remembering his father, suspecting it wasn't out of simple fear. Saiyan asks archivist Kabu about a library for grimoires. Kabu confirms one exists, much to Saiyan's delight. However, his hopes are dashed when Kabu explains that only the master, Zemu, can enter and Saiyan needs his permission. Reicha asks why he's so against asking, and Saiyan complains that Zemu would never agree and would just lecture him endlessly. That night, he decides to take matters into his own hands. He creeps up to a door marked with the symbol for 7. Saiyan muses that being out of the infirmary means he can now wander at night. He uses his magic on the key to the gem. Then he sets off to explore the castle grounds. Unseen, a horned figure watches him from a window. Carrying the gem and key, Saiyan confidently strides through the vast, moonlit halls of the castle, dwarfed by the imposing statues that line his path. His exploration takes him past various parts of the castle at night. He passes a cordoned-off hallway, noting that the damage is still not repaired. Reaching a ruined balcony, Saiyan looks out at the starry sky. He peers over the edge at the dark, vine-choked waters below. He reflects that he's in an enchanted land, but doesn't even know where he is. Holding the glowing gem, he wonders if he will ever get out of here. Leaning on the railing, Saiyan laments that Raoi never taught him how to fly. He turns back towards the hallway and sees door 7. Yawning, he suddenly remembers his original goal for the night, to find a grimoire. Meanwhile, the horned figure, Roki, observes him from the ceiling. Roki reports to Zemu that after wandering for a bit, Saiyan fell asleep. Roki approaches Zemu, stating they knew Saiyan would do this and expressing concern. Roki argues that Zemu shouldn't allow Saiyan so much freedom and should instead bind him with a contract. Zemu dismisses the idea, simply telling Roki to keep an eye on him for a while. Morning arrives at Shakyuten Castle. Saiyan is jolted awake by a series of loud bangs on his door. Still groggy, he sits up in his book-filled room. He calls out that he's up and will be right there. A still sleepy Saiyan stumbles out of his room. He immediately trips into a supply closet, sending brooms and buckets crashing down around him. Rach looks on unimpressed, chiding the newbie for being so out of it, while Saiyan retorts that he now understands why Rach has trouble waking up. As they begin their chores, Saiyan asks Rachai if they know how to awaken a gem, but Rachai has no idea. Saiyan examines the gem Zemu gave him, remarking on how expensive it looks. Rachai confirms that pretty gems fetch a high price. Rachai speculates that the gem might have been polished to sell at a higher price, while Saiyan admits he doesn't know what is inside it. He explains that Zemu only lent it to him for an assignment. Reichai, however, thinks Zemu will probably let him keep it afterwards. This idea excites Seian, who confesses that he was hoping he could keep the beautiful gem for himself. Reichai remarks that for an apprentice, Seian is pretty clueless about his master, stating that Zemu is just that kind of person. Later, Seian sneaks towards door 7 again, his determination renewed. Unseen by him, the spectre Roki watches from the shadows. Roki is annoyed that the kid won't quit. Elsewhere, archivist Kabu wonders why the newbie has been visiting during the day. In the library, Reichai tells Kabu that Seian comes to search for a grimoire during his training breaks, and Kabu notes Seian's studious nature. Reichai finds this odd since Seian has plenty of books, but Kabu explains that Library 7 contains myths and legends. Kabu specifies that there are many stories about divine and evil eyes from a time when they were called wicked eyes. Reichai recalls a curious thing Seian said, wondering if he can read ancient texts. In a flashback, Seian mentions that something struck him while reading in his room. The flashback continues, with Seian theorizing that evil eyes might be as rare as divine eyes. Kabu confirms that the odds for both are incredibly low. But Seian then revealed that the people who frequented a certain castle all possessed evil eyes. This revelation stuns Reichai. Kabu ponders that this might be the very reason why the flying country was called the Land of Curses and avoided by all. Since Kabu won't tell him where Library 3 is, Seian continues his own investigation. He guesses it must be near Zemu's office, a room full of oddities. Finding Zemu absent, Seian sees his chance to explore. He marvels at all the weird stuff inside. From a high perch, Roki watches with a scowl, vowing to make Seian pay if he vandalizes the master's room. Seian tries opening various locked chests to no avail. He then spots a peculiar object on the floor. It's a strange, disc-shaped doll with a single eye. Wondering if it's a gem doll, he gives it a curious poke. The doll springs to life, its eye flashing. Seian yelps in surprise as it shoots into the air with a boing. The doll begins to hover and spin, despite having received no orders. Suddenly, the doll sprouts tentacle-like appendages and begins busily cleaning the office. Seian realizes with a shock that it's a gem doll that cleans. Watching from outside, Roki transforms in fury, realizing this must be why they're never asked to clean the office. Seian considers dismantling the doll to examine it, but decides against it. While exploring, Seian discovers a previously unnoticed passageway and wonders where it leads. He follows it down a long, dark hall. At the end, he finds himself standing before an enormous, ornate set of double doors, flanked by many smaller, identical ones. Back in his room, Seian reflects on his explorations, noting that he's found several essential-looking places in the castle. He's particularly curious about the room full of doors that won't open. Frustrated with his lack of progress, he flops back onto his bed with a groan. Thinking this is taking forever, Seian considers just asking Zemu directly, but is immediately yelled at by Roki to keep it down. Giving up for the night, Seian focuses on the gem in his hand. He speaks its name, Raoe, and softly wishes for it to wake up soon. The moment he speaks its name, the gem erupts in a brilliant flash of light. Seian's eyes widen in shock. The gem's power activates, knocking him off his chair. The force lifts him into the air, pulling him up towards the ceiling as he yells in panic. Roki, still perched on the ceiling, cries out in alarm, wondering what is happening. Seian is pulled through an opening in the ceiling and finds himself outside on a balcony, face to face with Zemu. Though he still can't quite control it, he has managed to activate the gem's power. Floating upside down, Seian asks Zemu if he succeeded. Just then the gem's power cuts out, and Seian plummets to the ground with a thud. As he recovers, Zemu identifies the gem. He explains that it is a buoyancy stone, which possesses an intrinsic magic formula that reduces the weight of objects. Zemu tells Seian that by carrying the stone everywhere and constantly calling to it, his efforts paid off, and the stone has acknowledged him as its master. Seian wonders about being its master, while Zemu notes the stone is strong-willed. Elated, Seian asks if this means he can keep it. Zemu ignores the question and calls for Roki to come over. Roki appears, complaining about having to come out in the daylight. Zemu introduces Roki as a spectre from his household who has been watching Seian's movements for a while. With a grin, he adds that it appears Seian has been jaunting about the castle quite a bit. Seian is dismayed by the revelation. Zemu asks if he hadn't realized he was being watched. Seiyan admits he felt a specter lurking, and Zemu explains that they rely on buoyancy stones for flight because spells are hard to control. He elaborates that they integrate various magic formulas into the stones to stabilize them, turning them into functional tools like his own wizard's staff. Seiyan is intrigued by the idea of a wizard's staff. Zemu then announces that he will be leaving soon and will have a magic shop turn Seiyan's stone into a staff. Seiyan is ecstatic at the news. Zemu explains that a staff is something to be customized and he will take Seiyan to the shop to choose its form. He encourages Seiyan to make one he likes, even if he fails on the first try. Zemu then declares that Seiyan will be his traveling companion, leaving both Seiyan and Roki shocked. Zemu continues, a serious expression on his face. As the final exam for both Seiyan and Roki, Zemu announces he will hold an endurance game of tag within Shakyutin Castle that will last until dawn. Both of them cry out in disbelief as Zemu points at Roki and declares, "You're it." Roki, Zemu's subordinate spectre, is outraged at the situation. They cannot believe they have to play tag with a mere boy. But Zemu calmly explains that if he were it, the game would be over instantly. Besides, Roki had asked 3 times. Zemu tells Seiyan that Roki is a powerful, high-ranking spectre, and evading them will be excellent practice for going outside. Seiyan readily agrees to the challenge, while Roki protests. Zemu overrules Roki, who complains about the abuse of power. Roki angrily adds a stipulation of their own. Roki's condition is that if they win, Zemu must form a formal contract with Seiyan. Roki insists they can't relax until Seiyan is properly collared. The mention of a contract makes Seiyan recall a past conversation. Zemu smirks, revealing that he already has Seiyan collared, though Roki retorts that it's only a superficial one. The boy, though not fully understanding, agrees if it will convince Roki. Zemu asks Seiyan if he is sure about this. Seiyan confirms his resolve, stating that all he needs to do is win. Zemu acknowledges this is true. And so he prepares to start the game. Zemu announces the rules. The game of tag will cover all of Shakyutin Castle and its gardens, lasting until daybreak. As a handicap for being it, Roki must stay in their human form, which infuriates them. Zemu reminds Roki that they have centuries of experience on the boy and should be grateful enchantments aren't forbidden. Zemu advises Seiyan to do whatever it takes to get away. Zemu warns that he will step in if things get out of hand, but that would mean defeat for Seiyan. Understanding, Seiyan thanks a pouting Roki for playing. With the rules set, Zemu tells Seiyan to set out first. He will count to 100 before Roki gives chase. The game begins now. As Zemu begins his count, Seiyan bursts forward. Zemu notes how fast the boy is as he continues counting. He tries to placate a sulking Roki, promising to make it up to them later. Roki mutters that this is a dangerous idea, reminding Zemu of the disaster Seiyan could cause. Zemu simply asks them to bear with it. As the count nears 10, Roki grumbles about their contract with Zemu. They finally relent, vowing to catch the boy in no time. Sprinting down a hallway, Seiyan strategizes. He knows hiding is futile as his scent would give him away. He reflects on Roki's power. A high-ranking spectre unfazed by daylight is not an opponent to be underestimated. Seiyan decides to put as much distance between them as possible, but suspects running alone won't be enough. As he disappears into the castle's depths, Zemu watches from afar, curious to see how it plays out. Meanwhile, Roki begins the chase, hating the daylight. They are determined to end it quickly to avoid the other residents. Roki follows the trail to the bathhouse. They guess Seiyan tried to wash away his scent, but no, it won't make a difference. Roki scoffs at the attempt. While some specters dislike water, they are not one of them. Confident they can still track him, Roki bursts into a room, only to find it empty. The search continues. Roki leaps nimbly from ledge to ledge. The chase spills out onto the rooftops of the sprawling castle, with Roki relentlessly pursuing Seiyan. Roki notes that Seiyan is surprisingly mobile. They feel no haste, confident that following his path will lead to an inevitable capture. From a high perch, they spot something down below. Unseen, Seiyan hides on a narrow ledge, confident in his own hide-and-seek skills. But this is tag, not hide-and-seek. Seiyan prepares a new tactic, wondering how much a scent-soaked towel can distract a spectre. He peeks from his hiding spot. Roki rounds the corner and spots the decoy. Roki is annoyed by the trick, realizing it was a diversion. They were faster than Seiyan anticipated. The boy knows he can't afford to be found so soon and continues to flee. Seiyan is startled as Roki appears right in front of him. the specter looms over him, declaring they've found him. With a menacing look, Roki warns him not to even try to outpace them. A strange glint appears in Saiyan's eye. As Roki lunges, Saiyan faces his pursuer head-on, a plan forming in his mind. A memory surfaces. Zemu had once told him that gems intoxicate specters. Raicha had elaborated, specters relish mana but too much drives them mad. This is why they hide their eyes, as even servant specters can lose control. The final piece of the memory clicks into place. One must never make direct eye contact with a specter, because human eyes are the most valuable gems of all. Impressed by Roki's endurance but seizing the opportunity, Saiyan dashes away as Roki calls out for him to wait. The specter is left stunned and furious, clutching their head and cursing the brat. The game of tag continues in the lower levels of the sprawling Shakyutin castle. Saiyan flips through the air, landing gracefully on a window ledge. Having bought himself some time, he decides it's time to truly begin his plan. The buoyancy stone helps him climb, but Saiyan knows he's still no match for Roki's mobility. He reflects that provoking them with his divine eyes again would be reckless. His only option is to evade them until morning, but knows he'll be at a disadvantage if he steps outside. Meanwhile, Roki, having recovered, decides to abandon a direct chase and instead carefully follow Saiyan's scent. Running through a hallway, Saiyan spots Yukon, one of the castle's attendants. He rushes over, asking if she knows the specter Roki. Saiyan explains that he's in a game of tag with Roki until morning as a test. Yukon expresses her sympathy and agrees to help after Saiyan pleads with her. She warns him that Roki is not only fast but also has a keen nose, a fact Saiyan is frustratingly aware of. Saiyan worries that erasing his scent is impossible. Yukon confirms Zemu applied the rose scent to him and wonders if a barrier could suppress it. However, Saiyan admits he can't move while using his barrier. Realizing their only option is to confuse Roki's sense of smell, Yukon offers to gather more equipment for the long haul. Yukon hints that she has something else that could be useful. As Yukon prepares, Roki stalks a nearby corridor, sensing that their target is close. Roki is momentarily baffled by a decoy outfit, smelling Saiyan's scent coming from it. Now equipped with a fresh outfit and other items from Yukon, Saiyan dashes through the castle, ready to execute his plan. The trick works as Roki arrives at a fork and smells Saiyan's scent coming from both directions. Following a hunch, Roki decides to take the path on the right. Roki rounds a corner only to find their path blocked by a small, silent child named Iyo. Annoyed by the interruption, Roki demands to know what Iyo is looking at. Growing more impatient, Roki snaps at Iyo to speak up. Iyo finally speaks, pointing out that unlike Roki, they don't have the luxury of moving at such a high speed. Roki grumbles about not wanting to befriend the daytime inhabitants, but they are secretly surprised and a little touched that Iyo remembered their name. The moment is short-lived, as Iyo complains about the sheer number of towels. Iyo shouts after them, accusing Roki of abusing castle property. The chase leads Roki into a garden, where they are greeted by a cheerful, goat-headed resident. He invites the specter to join him in making jam, but Roki curtly dismisses the offer. Holding up a basket of fragrant apples, the goat man again invites Roki to join, but the specter insists they have better things to do. Elsewhere, Saiyan spots the long, snake-like creature Shimao. He whispers to it, asking if it knows where Roki is. Shimao uses its unique senses to pinpoint Roki's location. It informs Saiyan that the specter is climbing an exterior wall, and the boy thanks the creature. Saiyan remembers Raichai's advice about using Shimao's superior sense of smell to his advantage. Before darting off, Saiyan quickly turns back to ask Shimao one more thing. He asks where he can find someone named Yuzun. The castle chef stands before a large gong, ready to strike it. Roki follows a scent trail into the kitchen area. The chef strikes the gong with a deafening clang, startling the specter. Beforehand, the chef had spotted Roki and extended a friendly invitation to eat, which Roki flatly refused. The chef wonders aloud if specters can even eat if they want to. Roki snaps back that he should offer food to someone who will actually appreciate it. With that, Roki speeds away, startling Yukon as they pass. Yukon asks the chef if that was Roki, and the chef explains that he invited them to eat but was turned down. As Roki departs down a long hall, they feel a pang of sympathy for the chef. An overpowering scent of roses wafts through the air. Roki finally tracks down the source, another specter named Yuzun, who is carrying a large bouquet. Yuzun laughs at Roki's predicament. Yuzun smiles, remarking that the prince is doing a fine job of staying away. He mockingly observes that Roki seems to be having a fun game of tag, to which Roki angrily replies that it is not fun. Roki angrily asks if Yuzun is on the boy's side, reminding him that Saiyan shouldn't be let outside. Yuzun calmly claims to have no say in the matter. He states that they are both ultimately swept along by whatever Zemu decides. Roki tries to argue, but Yuzun continues, suggesting Saiyan is a child who has endured much due to others' choices. Yuzun tells Roki to give up, as their master, Zemu, has always gotten his way by granting people's wishes. Yuzun calls Zemu a fool who, despite wishing for a quiet end, always rushes to take on the burdens of others. Roki listens silently before turning to leave. As night falls over the castle, Yuzun declares his own intention to win the game, which would force Saiyan into a contract with Zemu, believing this is his time to shine. Yuzun stops Roki, pointing out that the Spectre has been conversing with many people today. He reveals that Saiyan has been asking for help from everyone in the castle, much to Roki's confusion. This entire conversation, Yuzun reveals, is just another one of Saiyan's tactics to buy time, as he will do anything to evade Roki. While Roki has been earnestly pursuing him alone, the boy has been busy gaining allies and exploring multiple paths to victory. Yuzun concludes that, unlike Roki, Saiyan does not hesitate to rely on others. Laughing, Yuzun taunts Roki, praising Saiyan's skill as a negotiator, a feat Roki could never manage. He reveals he even told Saiyan that Roki's weakness is being too serious, a remark that makes the Spectre tremble with rage. Far away, as night falls, Saiyan reflects on his situation. Perched on a tree branch, he notes that there are fewer things he can do at night. Suddenly, the wall beside him explodes, catching him completely by surprise. A furious, monstrous version of Roki emerges from the rubble, reaching for the shocked boy. The Spectre snarls, declaring that Saiyan has now seriously angered them. Watching the destruction from a distance, Zemu calmly notes that he forgot to tell them not to destroy the castle. Night falls on Shakyuten Castle, where an explosion rocks the building. Inside, Saiyan flees down a corridor, screaming in terror as debris rains down around him, a powerful force in hot pursuit. He dodges and weaves, his face a mask of terror. Saiyan throws up magical barriers to slow his pursuer, but they are shattered with ease. The Spectre Roki appears, unleashing a barrage of attacks. With a graceful spin, Roki deflects Saiyan's defenses and continues the chase. Roki presses on down the hallway, eyes narrowed with focus. Roki clicks their tongue in annoyance. They unleash a powerful slash that tears through the castle wall. Elsewhere, Yuzun calmly observes the destruction, commenting that it seems a bit excessive. Meanwhile, Saiyan races up a staircase, realizing his barriers won't hold for long against Roki's power. As he runs, Saiyan wonders why Roki is so angry. Suddenly, another wizard appears, shouting at Roki to stop damaging the castle. He reminds Roki that this is supposed to be a game of tag. Roki turns to the wizard with a challenging glare, asking if he intends to interfere. Roki snarls that the moment they are stopped, the boy loses the game. Zemu cautiously asks if Roki is just blowing off steam, but the Spectre insists they are doing as they please, aside from not transforming. Roki tells them to relax, as they don't intend to kill the boy, and commands them to be quiet and watch. The eye-patch wizard can only mutter about how furious Roki is. In a quiet library, Raichai discusses the situation, confirming the towels were a distraction for Saiyan's test to see if he can go outside. The attendant clarifies that it's to decide if Saiyan can accompany someone on a trip. Raichai wistfully remarks how lucky Saiyan is. Just then, Saiyan himself bursts through the doors. Saiyan rushes through the library, apologizing as he hands a towel to Raichai. Just as he escapes, Roki arrives at the doorway. Roki demands to know where the boy went. Saiyan calls out another apology, dropping yet another towel on Roki, who fumes with rage. He makes his escape through a skylight high above. Roki growls in frustration as Saiyan escapes through the skylight. Back in the library, the attendant calls it a scary game of tag, and Raichai wonders if Saiyan can last until dawn. Elsewhere, Saiyan takes a moment to recover, resolving to keep running and stay away from the other residents' quarters. He knows Roki's powers are stronger at night, making their aura easier to detect. Suddenly, Saiyan senses a powerful spectral aura. Startled, he turns to see what it is. Large, feather-like pillars of dark energy erupt from the ground all around him, trapping him. He tries to remain calm, recognizing it as one of Roki's illusions. From a distance, Roki focuses, trying to pinpoint Saiyan's location. Saiyan dodges the illusory attacks. Realizing his pursuer wants to capture him unharmed, he sees an opportunity and dashes away. He plans to locate Roki and maintain a safe distance. He scatters a handful of black feathers, creating a diversion of his own. The air fills with a swirling storm of black feathers, another illusion meant to disorient. Saiyan realizes this makes it harder to locate Roki. He continues to run, dodging Roki's barriers, aware that he is still within their range. Roki, perched on a high ledge, grows impatient with the barriers and illusions. They realize breaking the barrier will reveal Saiyan's location, but they must be cautious. Just as they prepare to strike, Saiyan's voice cuts through the chaos, calling Roki's name. He offers a proposal. Saiyan suggests there might be a way to settle things outside of the game. Wary of a trick, Roki wonders if Saiyan is trying to make them reveal their position by asking about contracts. Saiyan explains that he knows Roki wants him to form a contract, or collaring, with Zemu, and asks for an explanation. Saiyan steps out from his hiding spot, vulnerable. He asks Roki to explain the contract, so he can know if it's something he can live with. Yuzun watches from the side, realizing just how desperate Saiyan is to go outside. Roki remains silent, contemplating the boy's plea under the crescent moon. Roki finally speaks, explaining that a contract is made with a true seal. It is a core part of every living being's soul. With this seal, one can create contracts that bind the soul. Breaking the rules of such a contract means death, as it becomes an inescapable collar. Roki declares that such a contract is a necessity for a child with powers like Saiyan's. Roki explains that the only reason they don't have a contract is a personal choice. As they speak, Saiyan suddenly dashes past, having used the conversation as a distraction. A twitch of panic crosses Roki's face as they realize what just happened. The boy has stolen their true seal. In a flash, Saiyan appears behind Roki, holding the true seal he just snatched. Before the shocked specter can react, the seal activates with a poof of energy. Roki looks on in disbelief. Roki is stunned as the figure they cornered dissolves into smoke. They realize it was a duplicate that only smelled like the boy. Wondering how Saiyan could perform such a technique, Roki finds a note left behind, revealing the true architect of the scheme, Yuzun. Enraged at being tricked, Roki remembers Yuzun's smug declaration of being an artist. From a distant treehouse, Yuzun had mused about making even more elaborate shikigami. In a flashback, Saiyan is shown telling Yuzun that the more he practices making things, the better he gets. He presented Yuzun with a lock of his hair, asking for a likeness to be made. The flashback continues, revealing Saiyan's plan. He excitedly promised that if the decoy helped him win the game and go on a trip, he would bring Yuzun something back from the outside world. Yuzun agreed, asking only for the seeds of a rare flower in return. Yuzun recalls Saiyan's determination and decides multiple decoys would be more effective. Impressed that a single strand of hair could create such a good form, Yuzun gave the Shikigami a simple command. The decoys were to wander the castle and flee upon detecting Roki. From their perch, Yuzun had laughed, eager to see the chaos unfold. As Roki strikes down one of the fleeing decoys, it dissipates into smoke. Furious at being so thoroughly duped, Roki curses Yuzun's name. Meanwhile, the real Saiyan continues his escape, amazed by the intensity of Roki's aura. He is confident the distraction will work. Elsewhere, Zemu watches the boy's progress in a crystal ball. A shadowy familiar appears, chiding him for watching the boy when he should have been keeping an eye on Roki. Zemu calmly states that this is a test for the boy. The familiar retorts that Zemu was ready to intervene, impressed that Saiyan sought help from others. Zemu muses that a boy who carves his own path is dangerous, inside or out. The familiar teases Zemu, calling him One Eye. But Zemu merely sighs, declaring he is sick and tired of it all. Zemu watches Saiyan in his crystal ball, and a thought crystallizes in his mind: he must become the child's wizard. As Roki seethes with rage, Zemu continues to observe. The chaotic chase unfolds across the castle, with Roki in hot pursuit, Yuzun observing, and other residents caught in the destructive aftermath of the game of tag. Saiyan's desperate flight continues, a frantic race through the sprawling castle grounds as he evades his powerful pursuer. As dawn breaks, the chase finally concludes. Roki is left kneeling in defeat amidst the rubble of the castle courtyard. Zemu looks on from a balcony above. Zemu descends to the courtyard and coolly asks the fuming Roki if they are satisfied now that the castle is turning to dust. High above, Saiyan peeks out from a broken window. Zemu looks up at him and declares, "You win, boy." Overjoyed, Saiyan leaps from the castle into the open sky. Below, Roki points out to Zemu that it was Yuzun's scheme, and Zemu's distraction cost the castle dearly. Later, as a bell tolls over the castle, a new wizard's uniform hangs nearby. Saiyan sleeps peacefully in his room. He clutches a small key-like object in his hand, a memento of his trial. A knock awakens Saiyan. It's Zemu, who enters to check on him. He explains he came because Saiyan missed the evening meal. Saiyan looks up in confusion. The moment triggers a flashback to a different time, a different boy, a younger Yuzin kneels before an imposing emperor. The emperor looks down and asks, "Does something ail you, Saiyan?" Back in the present, Zemu addresses the boy by the same name, Saiyan. Startled, the boy explains that he just remembered his father used to call him that. It was a name given to him in the hope that one day he would be gifted with talent. In his room, Zemu confirms that the boy has remembered his name. He says the name Saiyan and tells him it's a good one. Saiyan, however, seems uncertain, questioning if it truly is a good name. Saiyan confesses that to him, the name feels more like a curse. Zemu listens, his expression unreadable. He asks Zemu if a contract isn't just another kind of curse. He continues, questioning if it's something that binds your very soul. Zemu corrects him, stating that it's not quite the same. He acknowledges that some people might see contracts in such an ominous light. He clarifies that a contract is more practical, something technical and even physical. This is how it is for real wizards, at least. Saiyan mentions what he's been told about the true seal being part of the soul. Zemu confirms this is partially correct. He summons a locked book to illustrate his point. He likens a living thing to a book and the true seal to its lock. The word lock echoes in Saiyan's mind. With a click, Zemu opens the book's lock. Saiyan watches wide-eyed as the pages flip open. Zemu explains that once the lock is open, you can write directly inside the book. That, he concludes, is what wizards' contracts are like. Saiyan is stunned by the idea of writing directly into someone. Zemu elaborates that achieving a flawless bond takes great expertise, unlike curses, which are less direct. He explains that the more a person is aware of a curse, the deeper it penetrates. He then challenges Saiyan to decide which is scarier. The implications of Zemu's lesson sink in, and Saiyan anxiously asks if Zemu took his true seal. Zemu flatly denies it. As the wizard tells him to get ready for their trip, Saiyan becomes agitated. He questions why Zemu won't bind him more securely if he's going to be let out. Zemu turns and tells Saiyan he has already been bound for some time. He reminds the boy that his magic is expensive and that while he'll consider a contract if Saiyan insists, it may not guarantee his safety. With that final word, Zemu leaves Saiyan alone in the room. Elsewhere in the castle, a resident named Yukon gushes over Saiyan's name, calling it lovely and royal. Saiyan clarifies that because commoners were forbidden from addressing royalty by name, only his father ever called him Saiyan. He tells them to call him whatever they like now, leaving Yukon and a quiet Rach unsure how to respond. Yukon decides to just keep calling him Prince and focuses on making him a new overcoat. When Saiyan compliments her skill, Rach explains that Yukon came to the castle wanting to make clothes. Yukon reveals she was a spectre and couldn't wear what she liked, much to Saiyan's surprise. She explains that unless a spectre has a high enough rank, they are limited in the clothes and colors they can wear. Yukon continues, saying her goal is to become a humanoid since raising a spectre's rank is impossible. Saiyan realizes this is why she trains so hard. Yukon finds her new form rewarding, not just for the joy of making clothes for others. She also cherishes the simple pleasure of tasting delicious human food, a sentiment Raicha enthusiastically agrees with. Later, while carrying brooms, Saiyan asks Raicha if there's anything she wants from the outside. He explains he wants to get Yukon some thread or fabric to thank her. Raicha replies that she doesn't need any souvenirs. Since she can't leave the castle for decades, all she wants is to hear his stories about the outside world. Saiyan is shocked to hear it could take decades for her to be able to live. Raicha explains she has a temporary humanoid form from Zemu. If she left now, she would revert to a beast and die of old age. She tells him that before this, she couldn't do anything. She recalls her past life as a helpless animal, constantly enduring cold, hunger, and fear. She hated being powerless. The frustration of her miserable existence was overwhelming. One winter, at her breaking point, she decided to climb Mount Yin. It was a sacred place, so high its peak was always hidden in clouds where the gods were said to reside. She kept climbing the snowy peak, but has no memory of ever reaching the top. At the summit, the small, exhausted creature was met by Zemu, who gave her the name Rachel. He offered to grant her wish if she served him at his castle, but she was too stunned to say anything. She finishes her story with a cheerful smile, saying it all worked out. Seiyan quietly processes the fact that she was once an animal. Rachel thoughtfully adds that long ago, people like Zemu who could see the unseen and hear the voiceless were called wizards. Downstairs, a crowd of residents has gathered. Yuzin offers a farewell gift of mystic sage grass seeds. One of them spots Zemu approaching. Seiyan finally rushes down, apologizing for being late. He's stopped in his tracks by the sight of Zemu, who has transformed into a woman. Floating playfully, Zemu chides his apprentice for being late, boasting that for someone like them, preparing for a journey takes only a moment. Seiyan can only stare, completely bewildered by this female version of his master. Zemu declares that true seasoned travelers make do with minimal luggage, which Rachel finds puzzling as Seiyan doesn't have much to begin with. The castle residents bustle around Seiyan, offering him a boxed lunch, a water bottle and other supplies for his journey. A resident helps Seiyan pull up the hood of his new coat. They explain that there is a visor inside that can be adjusted with a string to help conceal his identity. With the visor down, the resident is pleased that Seiyan's eyes are now hidden. One of the residents worries that Seiyan's dashing looks might still attract attention, prompting Rachel to mutter about her going above and beyond. A friend apologizes for not doing anything for his first outing, but Seiyan reassures her it's fine. Rachel asks if his joy for the journey has finally overcome his fear, and Seiyan happily agrees. He then mentions that he's always had a dream he wanted to achieve if he ever left the royal villa. Rachel inquisitively asks what that dream is. Seiyan shyly asks Rachel if he can consider her his friend. Rachel is momentarily stunned by his question. She quickly feigns indifference and agrees, much to Seiyan's delight. He celebrates, exclaiming that one wish has come true before he even heads out. Seiyan takes Rachel's hand, sincerely telling her that she is his first friend. He then addresses everyone, thanking them for everything and announcing that he is leaving. The residents bid him farewell, telling him to be careful. Rachel shouts a final, boisterous farewell. Seiyan waves back as he and Zemu head towards the exit. As they depart, one of the residents wonders where they are going. The two walk down a long, dark corridor. Seiyan asks Zemu if he should still call them master outside the castle, and Zemu agrees it's a good idea. They continue towards a large, ornate door at the end of the hall. At the door, Seiyan is surprised to see a specter named Roki. Roki tells Zemu that since they bite him, he isn't worried about their strength. However, he warns that the outside world will be tough in many ways. As Roki bids them farewell, Zemu interrupts, telling him he's coming too. Roki is shocked by this revelation, exclaiming that nobody told him. Zemu explains that Seiyan can't fly properly yet and will need his help. He clarifies that Roki is going to fly with Seiyan on his back. Roki protests, but Zemu states he's the only high-ranking specter who can fly a child with divine eyes on their back. Zemu urges him to hurry and transform, but Roki argues that Zemu could just give Seiyan a ride. Zemu teases Roki, suggesting he was just worried about Seiyan and will also serve as their bodyguard. Roki furiously denies it, claiming he can't stay sane carrying him, but Seiyan offers encouragement. Fed up, Zemu orders Roki to just do it, much to Roki's frustration. With a frustrated roar, Roki transforms into a massive bird-like specter, startling Seiyan. Seiyan's shock quickly turns to awe as he gasps at how cool Roki's new form is. He excitedly praises the specter's features, calling him the coolest he knows, much to Roki's annoyance. Flustered, Roki bellows for him to stop staring and just get on. Seiyan happily thanks him and prepares to climb aboard. With Seiyan safely on his back, Zemu announces it is time to go. Seiyan hesitantly asks if they could check on his country, if they have time. Zemu agrees, confirming their first destination is the former site of the flying country. Zemu tells Seiyan to brace himself. With a gesture, the great doors begin to open to the night sky. They launch into the vast, open expanse. The trio soars through the night sky, heading towards a massive, strange sphere of energy on the horizon. Zemu explains that the sphere is a kaihen that he is containing with spells and that it is the former location of the flying country. Looking at the devastation, Seiyan whispers that he doesn't recognize it at all. Seiyan spots a remnant of a building in the distance and asks to get closer. Roki obliges, zooming towards the structure. After landing, Seiyan recognizes the shape of the roof. He recalls that there were many temples like this along the country's edge, visible from the royal villa. He remembers being told they were watchtowers for intruders. Confronted by the destruction, Saiyan asks Zemu if this is what it means for his country to be gone. He then asks the crucial question, what exactly is a Kaihen? Zemu somberly replies that's something they would also love to know. Suddenly, a new figure with two-toned hair appears, accompanied by a floating eyeball, causing a chill to run down Saiyan's spine as he recognizes him as Kietsu. A mysterious phenomenon known as Kaihen, a forced dismantling of the world, has been confirmed in 4 cases, the most recent of which occurred in the Flying Country. Amidst the ruins of the Flying Country, a cloaked figure sits alone. Suddenly Kietsu, the Wizard of Black, appears before the group, greeting them calmly. Saiyan's heart pounds in his chest as he stares in disbelief. His eyes are fixed on the strange, massive eyeball dangling from the newcomer. Zemu materializes beside Saiyan, remarking that Kietsu has arrived too soon and confirming the wizard was watching them. Kietsu calmly acknowledges that he was indeed watching. Zemu warns Saiyan to stay back, identifying their foe as the Wizard of Black, the shadiest of the 7 colors, and prepares to handle him. The tension rises as Roki, the Great Spectre, begins to lose control, crying out to Zemu that the presence of 3 divine eyes is too much for him. Saiyan looks on, alarmed at the mention of 3 divine eyes. While Roki begs to leave, Zemu furiously reminds him of his duty as their bodyguard. Kietsu looks on, noting the curious spectre Zemu keeps. He then comments on his concern for his apprentice's sense of reason. Kietsu directly addresses Zemu, asking if he can borrow Saiyan. Zemu refuses flatly. Undeterred, Kietsu continues, stating that the boy was at the heart of a Kaihen. He then asks if Zemu has seen the Kaihen's record. Zemu realizes Kietsu's true motive, but states he is not obligated to reveal anything. Kietsu notes that he expected Zemu to shield the boy. He briefly wonders what to do next. In a flash, he appears before a startled Saiyan, tapping him on the forehead. Kietsu leans in, asking for a minute of his time. Zemu urgently warns Saiyan not to answer, identifying Kietsu's words as a curse. Kietsu prepares to take Saiyan's silence as consent. But the boy speaks up, asking what he will get in return. Kietsu smiles, explaining that the time of an immortal like himself is far more valuable and expensive than Saiyan's. Suddenly, a thorny vine wraps around Saiyan, pulling him away from Kietsu. Zemu chastises the boy, asking what he was trying to do, while Saiyan realizes he's been bound by the rose barrier. Saiyan apologizes, admitting he doesn't know how his plan would have worked. Saiyan explains his desperate logic. If his eyes have the power to bring back the dead, maybe they could also kill an immortal. Zemu reacts with exasperation. He turns to Kietsu and tells him to leave Saiyan alone, as the boy is more trouble than he thinks. Zemu brushes him off, saying he's too busy to deal with this now and warning Kietsu not to let his own power get out of control. Kietsu counters, warning that Saiyan's 2 divine eyes lack control and their overlapping powers could trigger another Kaihen. Kietsu notes Zemu's view on Kaihen. He remarks that his own perspective is a little different. Zemu questions this, asking why Kietsu is then avoiding stepping too deeply into the spiritual vein. Kietsu replies that if Zemu wants to know about Kaihen, there are quicker ways than questioning the boy. Zemu identifies the dragon's eye Kietsu carries, stating that it's cursed and distorts temporal laws, allowing for time travel. Saiyan listens, shocked to learn of the cursed eye. Kietsu confirms Zemu's words are true, while Zemu adds that he'd love to do that but there's a catch. Kietsu reveals the catch: he can only time travel 1 more time. Zemu dismisses Kietsu's method as roundabout, stating all he can do is witness records of the past. Zemu realizes the importance of this information, noting that Kietsu must have plenty of material to work with if he could find out Saiyan's name. Zemu then has a realization, stating he now knows why Kietsu is here. Zemu declares that Kietsu wants to know about the wizard killer. He points out that Kietsu brought it up before Saiyan even appeared and demands he state his reasons for questioning the boy like a detective. Kietsu sighs, his expression weary. He confirms his suspicion that Zemu hasn't seen the record. Kietsu states he's out of time and doesn't want to use force. He warns Zemu that in their current positions, he can't be beaten. Zemu tries to interject, but Saiyan interrupts, demanding they stop excluding him from a conversation that is about him. Kietsu guesses that Saiyan has lost his memory. He explains that if he opens the record inside Saiyan, he will know everything. Saiyan refuses, stating he won't have his insides tampered with by a stranger. Kietsu remarks that for royalty, Saiyan should understand the bigger picture. Saiyan demands the materials and time to decide for himself. Kietsu observes that it seems Saiyan is trying to shoulder the burden alone instead of accepting the help right in front of him. Kietsu stands before them, holding the cursed dragon's eye, his presence imposing. He regards them with a faint, knowing smile. Kietsu warns that he can't wait long and will hunt Saiyan down by force when the deadline comes. Saiyan counters, saying he dislikes the idea of someone spying on his insides and asks if a verbal response would be acceptable. Kietsu threatens to call the deal off entirely. The threat sends a chill down Saiyan's spine. He quickly concedes, exclaiming "fine" before Zemu can protest. Kietsu accepts the deal, creating a magic circle beneath his feet. As Zemu launches an attack, Kietsu calmly ignores him. Instead, he brands Saiyan's hand with a glowing mark representing the number 13. He gives the boy a deadline until the next full moon. After 13 days, he will come to pry him open. Calling the mark a reservation for access, Kietsu disappears into a dark portal. He leaves a stunned Saiyan and Zemu behind as the mark on Saiyan's hand smokes, a memory